Hello there, very good morning. The Church of England in crisis.
The Archbishop of Canterbury has resigned as more senior clergy are named in the child sex abuse scandal.
Justin Welby admits it's brought a profound sense of shame upon the Church.
So who's next in line to take over?
Can Labour's reforms fix the NHS? The Health Secretary is set to name and shame poor-performing hospitals that critics fear vulnerable patients will suffer, though. We'll be joined by the Health Secretary, Wes Streeting, in half an hour.
President-elect Donald Trump appoints Elon Musk as co-lead of a new efficiency department that he hopes will dismantle bureaucracy within the White House.
Meet the winner of the James Dyson Award, whose invention is helping those undergoing chemotherapy.
As other nations give the COP29 climate conference the cold shoulder, we're asking, should the UK be leading the charge towards net zero?
And in the sport, Gary Lineker confirms he will finish on Match of the Day at the end of the season, but who will take over? 58, Mike Tyson gets ready for his first fight in 19 years. And I have the race that tests resilience, fortitude and probably stupidity in Antarctica.
Chilly out there again this morning, and once more some quite thick fog patches, but the dry November continues and some of us will see a bit of sunshine. To find out where, join me later for a full forecast.
Hello there, very good to see you on this Wednesday morning. I'm Eamonn Holmes.
I'm Isabel Webster and this is GB News Breakfast. I was just rifling through the papers, as I do just before we go on air. I saw a cartoon saying that, you know, with Justin Welby making the position available to be Archbishop of Canterbury, and with Gary Lineker taking an exit out of Match of the Day.
How funny that you were saying that. As I was talking about, I thought, oh, there's
a good spot for
yes,
Gary.
Hello, there's a little link there.
Anyway.
I don't think Justin Welby would be the host of the new Match of the Day. I don't think that's going to happen. I have a feeling that's not going to happen, though, somehow.
Very
or
good.
Gary Lineker being the new head.
So you don't think either is going to work?
Well, many people think he likes to preach, so you never know.
Exactly.
You never know, indeed.
You never know.
And the Archbishop of Canterbury, as you've been hearing there, has announced his resignation. That follows a damning report into a prolific child abuser associated with the Church of England. Well,
that review found that Justin Welby could and should have reported John Smythe's abuse of young boys and men in 2013.
Victims have now called on further clergymen to resign as the Church looks to appoint a new Archbishop.
Well, let's speak now to Reverend Michael Corran about all of this. Look, it certainly seems as though yesterday it was an untenable position. He had to resign. He did the right thing, sought the permission of the King and tendered his resignation. But do more, I hate to use the phrase, but do, you know, more heads need to roll, do you think, or is the matter dealt with now?
Well, no. I mean, you're quite right. More people have to be questioned, exposed, and maybe penalised for what they did. I mean, yes, it was the right thing for him to resign, but it took him long enough to do so. And there were so many people in the clergy and in congregations who were speaking out. Only one bishop, though, which I think is extremely relevant. Only one bishop had the courage to come forward, the Bishop of Newcastle, and say, you have to resign. But this has been going on for a long time. People knew as early as the 1980s, and certainly by 2013 it was known. So there have to be more people involved. And look, I don't know the Archbishop of Canterbury. I'm sure he's actually a decent man. He failed in particular ways, and he's resigned. But what would be wrong would be to say, well, they've got their man now and it's all over. There's a systemic problem here. How did this abuse occur? How was it allowed to continue when other people knew about it? It's not just the Church of England, other religious organizations, not just religious organizations, sports clubs and the family, social clubs and so on. Abuse occurs when there's power, when there are vulnerable people, and when other people do not speak out and say there is a crime occurring here and it must stop. And that's what happened here. People obviously knew, and they did not stand up and be brave enough to say, no, enough. We have to report this person to the police.
It's interesting listening to you, Reverend Corran, talking about where else this exists. If this is endemic in society, I must admit, if I was sitting on any official board, I would just assume the chances are this person is guilty, the chances are this is happening. Let's look at this very, very seriously.
Well, look, there is a difference, and I think we've got to acknowledge this. And I sit here wearing a collar as a priest, and it's very painful to say this, but there is a difference when it comes to the church committing abuse, because as horrific as it is anywhere, when it comes to faith and church and membership of a religious organization, people have absolute trust and faith. They assume that they'll be safe. The last thing these young men were safe, but they thought they would be. We had in the Roman Catholic abuse crisis, children going home and saying, "Father did this to me," and then saying, how could you say such a thing? He would never do that to you. They believed the priest rather than their own child. Not because they were bad people, because they were trusting people. And it would be terrible if people lost trust in the clergy and in the church. That's why the Archbishop had to resign. It wasn't about him. It was the fact that, look, I'm speaking to you from Canada. It's not quite as bad here, but of course we are linked to the Church of England. The Anglican Communion we're part of that. People were saying to me, well, do we believe this anymore? Do we believe that anymore? Should we take what you say to be true? Because if the most powerful man in the church hasn't come forward to speak truth to power, if you like, then what should we really take as being gospel truth, if you'll forgive the pun? Great damage has been done. There is no denying that.
Is it irreparable damage, though, I suppose would be my question? You know, will people ever be able to feel like they can trust the church again? You know, the damage done to the Catholic Church in the wake of the number of abuse incidents there is, you know, I would argue a lot of people just will not trust their children in the company of priests for, you know, for many years to come, maybe never again. Is that now the case, do you think, in the Church of England? And perhaps, and this is just speculation, do you think that the reason that Justin Welby didn't energetically inquire more about it when he heard these revelations is because it was, you know, he heard them a lot. They were commonplace. I don't know.
Well, it's a very good question. I mean, the Catholic Church was severely damaged, but, and it's a much bigger organization, but hardly put out of business. It's still doing extremely well, and there's growth in certain areas. Now, the Church of England won't be destroyed. There are many factors that are besieging the Anglican Communion, and this is another one of them. It will do some damage, but irreparable. We have to build up trust again. That's not such a bad thing. I think there should be almost a permanent revolution when it comes to the church, always trying harder and harder. We have to deal with our other issues. We have to deal with how people in the gay community feel in terms of the church. We have to deal with a changing time, a changing era. We have to be more relevant. That doesn't mean being woke and contemporary, if you like. It means being relevant to people, what they need. It's not going to be easy. It's no use saying it's all going to be okay, people will forget. People shouldn't forget. They need to remember what happened. As to what was in the Archbishop's mind, I can't speak for him. I don't think he didn't come forward. I'd be very surprised because it was familiar to him. I think there may have been fear as to how much damage would have been done if these things were made public. I simply don't know. But I have heard horror stories about other churches where, yes, you're quite right, it was assumed that this sort of thing happened. I don't believe that to be the case in the Church of England. I've seen the anger privately and publicly from many clergy in England. They are so incredibly angry at this because what they're doing right now is what I'll be doing in the next few hours, writing a homily, preparing to take a funeral, speaking to people who are victims of abuse, who have lost their job, lost their home, are living in poverty, they're vulnerable, they're on the fringes of society. That's what we do most of the time. And it makes it more difficult if, as we said earlier, people don't trust. But beyond repair, no. As a person of faith, I can never say beyond repair.
Okay.
Reverend Michael Corrin, thank you very much indeed for your take and your perspective on things. We'll leave it there. Thank you.
In a statement, Justin Welby said, "It is very clear I must take personal and institutional responsibility for the long and re-traumatising period between 2013 and 2024. He said, "I hope this decision makes clear how seriously the Church of England understands the need for change and our profound commitment to creating a safer church. As I step down, I do so in sorrow with all victims and survivors of abuse. I believe that stepping aside is in the best interests of the Church of England, which I dearly love and which I've been honoured to serve, and I pray that decision points us back towards the love that Jesus Christ has for every one of us."
We'll take other reaction in just a moment, but just to say, going back to what the Reverend Corrin was saying there, I think the trust is dented. I don't think it is irreplaceably or irrespectively damaged. I spent 14 years of my life being taught by clergy, being surrounded by clergy, And all I can say is I was surrounded by good, spiritual, holy men. And I never heard one aspect of misappropriation, bad behaviour, whatever. Thankfully, I never heard that. But to have 14 years being taught by priests without complaint, I think is great. I'm not talking about orders like the Christian Brothers, who were basically like the paramilitary wing of the IRA. It was really, there's some really bad orders out there and really difficult people, whether it's through physical abuse or sexual abuse or whatever. And I think where the Reverend is right is that you lose the trust of the public. Nobody now goes in the company of Catholic priests and assumes everything's okay.
No, I know.
You spy, you look for something now, and they are now under supervision, really, I think.
Permanent suspicion.
Permanent suspicion.
Yeah.
But then they also earn your respect if that's what they do. The Bishop of Lincoln, he had this to say. He's also been urged to step down, and he since said this.
As part of my submission to the review, I confirmed that during my tenure as the Bishop of Ely, I received a disclosure about John Smythe. It was my understanding that this matter was reported to the police in Cambridgeshire and duly passed on to the police in Hampshire, where the abuse had occurred. I acknowledge fully that my fault was not in rigorously pursuing Lambeth about that province-to-province communication, and for this I am deeply sorry. For me, I think there are questions about the police and all of this. You know, both Justin Welby and the Bishop of Lincoln there saying that these matters had been referred to the police. Why have we not heard from the police about why there was not a rigorous investigation by either of those forces? And, you know, it can't all be the responsibility of the leaders of the church if there's been criminal behaviour. I'd like to know more about what was done from a sort of legal perspective in all of this as well.
Health Matters, the Health Secretary is set to name and shame poor-performing hospitals in a bid to tackle the ongoing NHS crisis. You'll hear from him live in half an hour.
There are critics, though, of this idea of league tables. Some are worried it could fail to address the root cause of the problems, and many saying that vulnerable patients would suffer as a result. So
can these reforms finally fix what is deemed to be a broken health service? Editor of Spiked Online, Tom Slater, would say hello, good morning to him. What do you think, Tom?
Well, it does sound a bit like a kind of management consultant's answer to a pretty big problem. The thing about the health services, as we all know, is that it is really on its knees. It has all these kinds of structural problems. But at the same time, it's quite clear that what this government intends to do is to give it enough cash to kind of continue as it is, whilst demanding reform. You then wonder, what are these reforms? And what we end up with is these kinds of ideas which, to be honest, sound like tinkering. So he's going to set up this league table, the idea being that you can put greater incentives on trust so that those who aren't performing well, their managers aren't being given bonuses, and also those who are performing better get greater autonomy, so that there's actually more of an incentive to handle your finances properly. There is also calls for and plans for these kind of turnaround teams of experts who will be deployed into particular trusts which are underperforming. But as we all know, the issues with the health service are beyond the fact that the incentives need to be tweaked in a certain way. There's obviously much deeper problems. And I think these reforms smack of that, really. There's just a kind of sense of tinkering whilst the health service itself is in a much deeper...
Are they as revolutionary as we were expecting? Because, you know, we've had lots of hints from Wes Streeting that he's going to do root and branch reform, but it sounds a lot, certainly these league tables, sound very familiar. And Alan Milburn, who is his special advisor, former health secretary under Blair, also introduced these league tables only to scrap them 4 or 5 years later. Will they work, and are they productive? Because we've heard other commentators saying actually pitting trusts and staff against each other is demoralising and counterproductive.
No, absolutely, and it's one of those things where even if these league tables worked perfectly, is it really going to address the kind of fundamental problems with the health service, which is we've ended up with a bit of the worst of both worlds as far as it's taking up an enormous amount of funding, and yet people aren't seeing the results of that. You know, in terms of our health outcomes are really not good if you compare it to certainly to a lot of our European neighbours. So it may well be that around the edges this has a bit of a positive impact on how individual trusts are run. But as you say, there's also critics who say that this kind of pitting one trust against each other isn't going to be positive. Regardless of anything, it just doesn't feel like a particularly transformative move, which is what the Health Secretary has been sort of hinting at over the course of the past.
What about this crackdown on expensive temporary staff, the use of locums, bank nurses? We know that that's absolutely extortionate and bleeding these trusts dry, but they're a necessary evil at the moment. I mean, we have these huge retention problems within the industry. We haven't got enough doctors and nurses. So, yes, it's expensive. What's his solution other than saying we're going to clamp down on it?
Well, that's where we really need to see that detail, because, as you say, no one thinks that this is a sensible arrangement. The amount of money which is going on these temporary staff and so on, and these locums, is something which doesn't make any sense. But it is, as you say, in response to an obvious problem, which is that we do not have the staff. And that's a kind of reminder, I think, of the fact that a lot of the problems that the health service is confronting right now at this kind of acute stage are really long-running. You need to kind of go back many years in terms of the plans which weren't made or the plans which weren't properly executed to make sure that the structure of the NHS was sound, and also that there were enough people coming through in order to staff it. So it's one thing for us to decry the use of these kind of emergency measures now. The thing that has always been lacking is that longer-term view as to what the health service needs in the long term and how to do proper reforms so that it actually delivers for people. That's always the thing that's lacking in a kind of tight, 4-year, 5-year election political cycle.
Yeah, absolutely.
Wes Streeting, 6:30, we think we're going to have him on the programme this morning live. So for the moment, Tom, thanks very much.
Thank you.
We'll talk to you again after we speak to him. Right, poll of the day. So every day we run one of these. Today, the question is Keir Starmer right to commit Britain to cutting greenhouse gases by 81%? That's over, 10 years?
Yeah, by 2035.
Yeah.
We'll be bringing you the live results throughout the day. Make sure you stay tuned for that. As always, the final result is in Martin Daubney's show this afternoon. We'll have our own little tally at the end of our programme just after 9 o'clock. And if you would like to cast a vote, you go to gbnews.com/poll.
OK, so is he right to cut GB greenhouse emissions by 81% over 10 years? Can it be done? Why should we lead the way in the world? Are we the people to do that? Should we be leading by example? Weather update, say hello, good morning, welcome, Alex Deakin.
Expect a warm front, moving from the kitchen right through to the rest of the house. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Morning, welcome along to your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. Again, it's a bit chilly out there this morning. Some fog patches around as well. Most of us having a dry day, and for some, there'll be some pleasant autumn sunshine. But first off, we do have to get rid of the fog. And for Western Scotland and Northern Ireland, not a lot of sunshine on offer here. Thicker cloud and at times some drizzly rain. We've lost the showers from the far southeast, still a small chance of one this morning, but generally it's going to be dry across England and Wales. Some patches of cloud and some stubborn fog patches, but much of southern England, eastern England and parts of eastern Scotland seeing some lengthy spells of sunshine, lifting the temperatures to 11-12 degrees Celsius, so about average for the time of year. Feeling colder, though, where it does stay fairly gloomy. And it's going to be quite a grey day in western Scotland. Rain and drizzle on and off along the coast here. Probably staying dry, though, through the central belt and across the northeast. Decent chance of some sunny spells. Quite a drab day for Northern Ireland. Lots of cloud here. Misty and murky conditions persisting for most of the day. Staying quite grey for northwest England and North Wales. And some stubborn zones of cloud across the Midlands. But elsewhere, I say, many places, South Wales, southern England, eastern England, seeing a fair bit of sunshine. The cloud will continue to drift southwards as we go through the night. That will help to keep the temperatures up, so it won't be as cold tonight as recent nights. Some holds here and there across Scotland could allow those temperatures to dip down close to freezing, but generally speaking, holding up in the mid-single figures for most of us into Thursday. And not as much fog around either first thing on Thursday, but much more in the way of cloud. A duller day, certainly across eastern England and southern England. Again, though, most places dry, but a drizzle here and there over the hills, and we'll see some rain and drizzle at times for northern parts of Northern Ireland, western Scotland, and some showery rain for a time across the Northern Isles. Temperatures, again, mostly getting up to double figures, 10, 11 or 12 Celsius. Signs of things turning colder, though, through this weekend.
Ooh, a chilly start will give way to a lovely, warm afternoon. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Why go out on a Friday night when Friday night comes straight to your home?
Talking about.
Join me and my A-team of top pundits. Chemistry tonight is electric. As we tackle the big stories of the day with wit, insight and fearless energy.
Man of the people.
It's all vibe. Just a filing cabinet on wheels with a tie on.
So, order in Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, every Friday at 8, only on GBNews, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the arguments. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together and what have we got, in my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently. It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it? It's explosive. I mean, this is very good. It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial. And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born. It's everything you need to kickstart your evening. Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it. That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more. Whether it's breaking royal news, Will, please bring us up to date, or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Right, let's turn our attention to America. Big news overnight, and the President-elect Donald Trump has confirmed that his big ally and donor, Elon Musk, will indeed have a role in his cabinet when he takes office in January.
He will lead the Department of Government Efficiency with former Republican presidential candidate Vivek Ramaswamy. Is that his name?
Yeah, that's right. A big biotech entrepreneur. This comes after Elon Musk donated millions of dollars to help to get Trump get elected as president.
So we're now joined by American political analyst. We say hello, good morning, welcome, Scotty Nail. Hughes, how are you?
Good morning. And how sad is it that we have to create another position just because the size of the U.S. government has gotten so big that we're having to create a position to actually scale it back down? I think that speaks to the reason why Donald Trump was elected almost a week ago in the first place.
How would Elon Musk even have time to do this?
Well, that's the thing. That's why Trump has said this is going to be a temporary position, 18 months max. But I think even Elon Musk realizes that when you have 428 federal agencies, more than the years of the U.S. existence, double it, you have to realize there's some inefficiencies that are happening within the U.S. government that does trickle down and eventually will affect the business and the people that are in the U.S. So I think he realizes he's doing this for the betterment of the United States, but ultimately it will also be better for his own business as well.
Well, do you think there will be lots of people working in Washington who will be quaking in their boots? Because when you remember that Elon Musk took over Twitter, not only did he rename it overnight, but he sacked everyone on the spot. You know, this is a guy who goes in all guns blazing. He could be quite, I don't want to use the word destructive, but certainly revolutionary, could he not?
I think that's an excellent or revolutionary. But let me point out, those folks have already been quaking in their boots probably since Donald Trump, not only did since he won a week ago, but probably over the past few months, seeing as his campaign continued to ramp up. But I will tell you, if you're a federal employee right now and you are doing your job and you are working hard and you can actually justify the work you're doing for taxpayer dollars, I guarantee that more than likely you'll be able to keep your job. If you're actually a good worker, the way Elon Musk works, just like Donald Trump works, you'll probably actually get a promotion. But if you're one of probably thousands that are just, sending it in, refusing to come into the office to work, you like working at home, you're not being an efficient spender of taxpayer dollars, then I might be polishing up my resume right now.
And do you think there will be any legitimate concerns about Elon Musk, who's already presiding over this social media platform, which a lot of people say gives him a bit of overreach when it comes to, there's a conflict of interest if he's working with the government, but also he's a businessman, isn't he? And as part of this role, not only will he not be answerable to the Senate, he won't need their approval, but he will be able to slash excess regulations and get rid of bureaucracy, which could benefit his own business. Is there a sort of excess of power being handed to someone who's been an enormous donor to Donald Trump?
Well, let's just point out that he is still going to be answering to Donald Trump, and Donald Trump is still answering to the people of America, and will be answering in 2 years when we have midterms. That's what the great thing about checks and balances is. But I think that Elon Musk realizes, once again, if America prospers, then that means that those that are in office who are doing good, they prosper. And more importantly, the world prospers. It is a small world, as we know. So I think ultimately this is all going to, if this works well and everybody does as they're supposed to be, it's going to be very much a one big network, hopefully making everybody rise, and as long as they're willing to work for it.
So you sound quite excited by this. I mean, are you hopeful that this would work?
Well, let me point out, I'm really sad that we have to do this in the first place. You would think if you work for the federal government that you are a servant, a public servant for the American people. That's obviously not been the case for the past couple decades. And it's sad that we're having to create a government position to come in and say, let's cut the pork, cut the fat. I am hoping, because it's good for all Americans, that we become an efficient company, like a business ran, with the empathy of a government that supports people in need. So I'm actually thinking this is a great way. Of all of the positions that Trump has appointed, I actually think this is one that sadly is needed, but it very adds to the hope that we have for America.
OK, Scotty Nell Hughes, always good to get your thoughts. Thanks very much indeed.
Thank you very much indeed. Excellent. OK, I'd put her in charge.
Yeah?
Yeah, she sounds as if she'd get the job done. Getting the job done with the health service, Wes Streeting. He's going to be live on our show next.
The latest GB News travel.
Good morning, I'm Russell Holding. Trains between Selby and Doncaster are diverting via Goole again today because of a points failure, with buses running between Doncaster and Howden. Trains aren't stopping between Syston and Barrow-upon-Soar, with some cancelled trains between Loughborough and Leicester because of a signalling problem. In Essex on the A12, the northbound exit at junction 19 for the Boreham interchange near Chelmsford's closed where a lorry's overturned. Trains have been stopped between Amersham and Harrow on the Hill because of a signalling problem. In London, Woolwich Manor Way is closed because of an accident. Regent Street's closed southbound towards Oxford Circus, and Cockspur Street's closed off Trafalgar Square for emergency water main repairs. Trains have been stopped between Wimbledon and Clapham Junction, where overnight engineering works have overrun, and trains have been stopped between Guildford and Havant, again where overnight engineering works have overrun. And that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
Britain's newsroom, weekday mornings from 9:30.
A Tesco store on a Scottish island has defied locals by ignoring pleas to stay closed on Sundays.
Tesco's has said that no member of staff in Stornoway would be forced to work on a Sunday, and that it had received a significant amount of positive reaction to its plans.
Well, let's talk now to the Minister of the Reformed Presbyterian Church, Reverend Kenneth Stewart. Good morning to you, Reverend Stewart. You're trying to keep Sunday special, and if Tesco are going to open up, that means it won't be quite as special for you.
Well, yes, good morning, and thanks for having me on. Yes, Tesco, for some reason, they claim it's not economic advantage, but for some reason they've decided to go against hundreds of years of tradition on this island and the deeply held religious convictions of many, many people, including, of course, their own customers who are really grieved by this decision. We come obviously from the standpoint that a day of rest is effectively mandatory. It's a human right, along with the other 10 commandments which have undergirded our moral and legal fabric in society. It actually enshrines the human right to a day of rest. And of course, in the UK, that's been eroded for many, many years. Incidentally, it's still far more respected on the continent. But for us here, the Sabbath or the day of rest has been very, very important. It's not just what we do, it's who we are. And for some reason, Tesco have decided just to go against that.
And Reverend Stewart, we were actually talking about this earlier, how in European countries, I mean, even in France, which is a secular country, still very few shops will open on a Sunday.
GB News, the People's Channel.
We're delighted to say we can welcome the Health Secretary live on the show today. Hello, good morning, Wes Streeting.
Good morning.
Good morning, Wes. You're talking about no more rewards for failure within the NHS. Just what I want to ask you is, naming and shaming people who get it wrong. What good will that do, really, when all they need is help and support and know how to do it right?
Well, what we're setting out today is a package of reforms that will go alongside the investment that the Chancellor announced in the budget, because I think the big reaction, if I was to speak for your average viewer, was certainly welcoming the investment in the NHS, but anxious about whether that money will be well spent. And what I'm setting out today in a speech to NHS leaders from across the country is the approach that we will take to rewarding the highest performers by letting go of the top-down centralisation and control, which is excessive in the NHS, supporting those leaders who are in challenging areas where performance is nowhere near as good as we would like it to be, and where their performance falls short of the leaders of the pack, and where we've got consistent underperformance, to make sure that we're taking action and we're not just allowing people to coast along, drifting and failing.
But what I'm saying, are they only penalised, or are they helped, or are they encouraged to put it right?
It's both. In fact, one of the things I'm announcing today is a new college of leadership and clinical excellence, which will support leaders in the NHS to be the best that they can possibly be. We've got some great leaders across the NHS, it's worth saying, and we've got emerging leaders who need to be supported to be the best that they can be, to provide great care for patients. So the support will be there, but we've also got to make sure that we tackle chronic underperformance from very senior managers. And let's bear in mind that very senior manager pay on average is £145,000 a year. So we're talking about people responsible for running large organisations with a heavy responsibility on their shoulders. We've got some outstanding leaders, and where we have that outstanding leadership in place and where we've got the best performance, the centre should let go. We should give them more freedom, more autonomy, less top-down control, less central diktat. Where they are underperforming, we need to step in and take action. And in most cases, that will be through additional support, taking the best of the NHS, the rest of the NHS. But where people are consistently underperforming, I'm afraid we shouldn't tolerate it.
Why would a good manager want to go and work at a struggling trust if they knew that their pay would be docked, if they couldn't turn things around, if it was too big to solve? There's no incentive there.
And that's exactly why we're going to incentivise some of our best leaders to go into some of our most challenged systems. And one of the things I've been reflecting a lot on is that there are NHS providers across our country that have been in areas of consistent underperformance. So even when the NHS has been at its best, as it was under the last Labour government with the shortest waiting times and the highest patient satisfaction, those areas still fall behind. And you can't just put that down to the boss, the leader at the top, because clearly there are some underlying factors, and that's where we want to get some of our best leaders in some of those most challenged areas. I mean, if you take my own local trust, the Barking, Havering and Redbridge Trust on the London-Essex border, my local trust has been in and out the headlines over the years as a troubled trust in and out of special measures. We've now got an outstanding leader in Matthew Traynor. The work that he is doing with his clinical teams and the reform that he has led means that we've got some of the best performance in the country now on things like reducing the waiting list, the way he's reformed the backlog busting clinics that the trust runs. It's been recognised as one of the fastest performing trusts in the country. So that's a really good example of how great leadership, even in some of the most troubled trusts, can make a really big difference. And that's what we want to recognise, reward, incentivise. Where senior leaders fall short because of their own failings, we shouldn't tolerate that.
No, but I'm just wondering how they shift that. I mean, this massive backlog, particularly in waiting lists, and these ordinary consumers of the National Health Service and viewers and listeners of GB News that you were talking about there earlier, they just want the queues to dry up. They just want to be seen quicker, and they want to be seen correctly and efficiently and whatever. So how on earth do you come in and just get rid? Is the answer not surely to supply more staff, more nurses, more doctors, more equipment, better equipment?
Well, we've talked a bit about how we're going to measure senior leaders. Let me just reassure your viewers, I'm under no doubt about how they are going to judge me, my performance and the performance of this government on the NHS, which is exactly that. How long are they waiting? How long are the waiting lists? That's how we'll be judged at the next general election. So the steps I'm taking out today are the steps that I will use, the tools I will use to better lead the system, to make sure it's better managed. But to your point about, isn't it just about pouring more resource in, more money in? I mean, one of the things that the Darzi investigation that we commissioned straight after we came into government found was that we've seen a big increase in the number of staff in our hospitals, but we haven't seen the same increase in the number of procedures. So more resource has gone in, but productivity hasn't kept pace. And that's got to change. That's one of the reasons why, since the general election, to deliver the 40,000 more appointments every week we promised as our first step, we've been sending in teams of top clinicians who've got experience of reforming the way their clinics works, using effectively Formula One techniques to organise their clinics so they can get through more cases more quickly on a single day. In fact, the hospital I can see from my office in Westminster, they actually do as many procedures with different ways of working on a single Saturday than they would normally do throughout the entire working week. And that's why the investment needs to be linked to reform. And that's the reassurance I want to give to your viewers. Yes, there was big investment announced for the NHS in the budget. That is directly linked to reform. And before that money starts pouring in from April, we're fixing the plumbing first.
OK, just before we let you go, we're running a poll on GB News today in relation to Sir Keir Starmer's pledge yesterday that he wants to cut British emissions by 81% by 2035. We're asking our audience if they think he's right to suggest that. And my question to you is, you know, there he is saying he's not going to tell people how to live. Our audience simply do not believe that and are not convinced. Why should they trust him?
Well, look, let's just put to one side the fact that climate change is one of the biggest challenges facing our planet, and there are consequences for not just for the world, but for our country particularly, in terms of what would happen if global warming continues well above where it really needs to be to stop this becoming catastrophic. There's a massive opportunity here in terms of the new green industries, green technologies, massive opportunities for jobs and reindustrialisation in parts of the country that have seen massive job losses and the loss of traditional industry. So there's something in it for Britain, in it for jobs, in it for workers, through being at the head of the pack when it comes to the new green technologies that will shape the future, not just of our country, but of our world. And that's the argument that Keir Starmer is making at the COP summit this week, so that we're on the map for investors thinking about where to put that investment, to put those jobs, to put those industries. And of course, for the consumer, if we can get more of our energy supply through domestic energy production and clean power made here in Britain, that will not only make us less vulnerable to global whims and to conflict. It will also help us to bring down bills through our own homegrown energy production.
Okay,
So there's
Health
something in it
Secretary,
for the consumer as
we're
well.
being told by your team that we have to let you go, so we will do that. Thanks very much, and we will open that up to our audience.
Sorry, we're on a tight round, but nice to speak to you.
Enough.
Thanks a lot.
Whether or not our audience will be convinced, let us know at home. Are you, do you trust what Wes Streeting was saying there, that the Prime Minister will not tell you how to live your life in the ambition of cutting emissions by 81% by 2035?
Christmas giveaway. Here's the competition.
You could win Christmas on us this year.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
Sunday with Michael Portillo from 11, only on GB News.
In 2020, after almost 80 years, Oxford University's Pitt Rivers Museum removed its famous collection of shrunken heads with sewn-up lips and eyes made by the South American Shuar and Ashwar people. How do museums decide what should be shown and what should be confined to storage? Can controversial exhibits be left on display with suitable contextualisation in captions? Who would want to be a curator facing such controversial questions? For review, I'm delighted to be joined by journalist Eitan Smallman. Welcome to GB News. I think many people, when they hear that we're going to discuss museums or art galleries, think that it's going to be, that wokery question. But it strikes me, and I think it strikes you too, that this is not just about wokery at all. There are some really interesting ethical questions here. For example, let's start with this one, and there are several examples of it. Should we be displaying human bodies, the remains of human beings? Should we be displaying them in museums?
Absolutely. It's not just the usual suspects, young snowflakes, who are objecting to these things. They're just naturally cultural shifts, and people of all ages and all political persuasions may feel uneasy about displaying human remains of any kind, especially human remains that have been taken against the will of the communities or taken violently. Hilary Mantel led a campaign to remove a 7-foot 7-inch skeleton of Charles Byrne, known as the Irish Giant, from the Hunterian Museum. He had specifically said that he didn't want to be displayed and didn't want to be taken by anatomists, and yet was displayed for a couple of hundred years until a couple of years ago. He hasn't had the burial he requested, but he's no longer on public display.
GB News, the People's Channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akweer, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
We have now got Paula London and we have got Oscar Redrop, and they've got the newspapers in front of them. Front page of The Sun today. This takes up quite a lot of mileage in the papers today. Whoever the new host for Match of the Day may well be. Indeed, may it be two people at once. And we've got the job being shared here. Kelly Summers and Mark Chapman, front page of The Sun. And it says here, Oscar, that Mark Chapman, if he is offered it, he will not be sharing it.
Yeah, I don't quite understand that. I think Match of the Day, as we all know, is an institution. It's one of the greatest sporting programmes the country's ever produced. I think Mark should probably be very grateful to have been offered to share the role. I don't quite see...
Just to get within sniffing range.
Yeah, precisely. I think, look, like, the way football highlights are shown now, they come out instantaneously. Yeah. Match of the Day, has to keep up with that, and that's very difficult. And it will need a big personality with, like, real charisma, I think, to carry that off. Gary Lineker, as I'm sure many viewers would agree, I think really did kind of pushed the envelope too much and really overstepped the mark. You know, it kind of, you know, someone with a particular political background like myself who loves football.
He never did that on Match the Day. That was just in his tweets. It was not like he ever brought politics into
it colours your perception. You know, you just want like that kind of wholesome charisma, football kind of specific knowledge, and he could do that, but it really turned for me with all the politics with him. It really
what
did.
gets me is the BBC find themselves in a situation whereby they haven't got big enough names to host this sort of programme. And people who I don't think are particularly well qualified, like Mika Richards or whatever. So what do they do about this? And you think they should spread their net outside Paula?
Well, ordinarily, I think that men should commentate on men's football. Not that I know much about football, but I do think the game is very different from women's football. But I do think Laura Woods is very, very good. I think she's very likeable. She's very popular with men and women, and she knows her stuff.
She knows her stuff.
That's the number one thing. She knows her stuff. So I wouldn't be unhappy if she took the job. And she's pregnant at the moment. She's now with a guy that was actually in Love Island. So once she has the baby and has maternity leave, it could be the right timing.
Well, no one's saying these folk don't know their stuff. They do know their stuff. But a lot of them don't have reputations or personality. And when you look, you know, down through the years, the David Colemans, the Jimmy Hills, the Desmond Lynams. I mean, no one better than him. To do all of that. It was the only job I ever wanted on TV.
You know a lot about football. I'm very impressed when I watch you talk about Manchester United. You could be a football commentator.
I could do this job with my eyes closed. I could. I was made to do this, but I lost out in that time to Gary Lineker, who had got. He had the football name. They often see, and you know, these executives, they fall madly in love often with players. They're now going back. It looks like to fill a cost. Sector in this, they're getting someone at half the price of Lineker is what they're deliberately looking for in this new slimmed down BBC.
Yeah, well, he's burnt them a little bit. I think you know he really took them to task. They weren't quite able to exert their authority over him in that power balance. And now, you know, a year or so later from the controversies with Gary Lineker when they had that walkout. He's now walking away from them because he's on to bigger and better commercial things.
Have your say today. You know what to do to have your say. Log on to the website, and if there's anybody you'd like to see hosting Match of the Day, let us know.
Let's turn our attention to what we were just chatting to the Health Secretary about, and this is league tables. You could call them football-style league tables if we want to carry on a theme this morning, to try and reform the NHS. At front of the Guardian, but actually lots of the papers this morning. What did you make of what A, he had to say, and B, you know, his reforms that have been long-trailed?
Yeah, well, look, Wes gives you guys good interviews, I think, and I think you guys not all broadcasters do this. And this was literally my job in government, was to sort out, you know, kind of the media interviews for Secretaries of State, as you keep him on the issue itself. And he explains it very well. He gives you time. But in terms of the actual policy itself, this is, I think you made this point, actually, it's just classic 101 New Labour kind of style, restructuring, looking like we're really trying to keep on it and monitor stuff, but not really overseeing any kind of long-lasting substantive change.
It's not that original, is what you're trying to say.
It's really not. I mean, it's just absolute, like, if I had to describe a New Labour policy, it is, you know, a league table.
Yeah.
Is that going to work?
But that being said, I mean, apart from the unions, pretty much everyone is desperate for the NHS to be reformed. So, you know, should we be welcoming and hoping for the best that this can sort it out?
You say reformed, people just want it to work.
Yeah,
that's what people don't know what reform means, and work probably means more staff, more equipment.
Yeah, but I think it's very normal in the private sector to have accountability. If you don't do your job correctly, A, you don't get bonuses, or you could even lose your job. I think too many people think they have carte blanche to do what they like when they have a cushy NHS job, and they should be held accountable. If you're not doing your job properly, other people should see.
They will never get these lists down. Never.
Well, at school, they banned, like, sports days because people felt bad if they were second, third, fourth, fifth. But for me, I loved it because you'd work harder to achieve. So if there are league tables, other hospitals could work harder to beat their peers, as it were, in another local hospital.
Paula, let's talk about Keir Starmer and this carbon emissions target that he set for 10 years' time to reduce Britain's output by 81%. So the answer to this is front page of the Times as well.
Yes. I just think he's a ridiculous man. All he wants to do is offend people. He'll annoy people in one sector. Now he wants to annoy the meat eaters. I mean, I love a good steak. I just think it's ridiculous. These people don't know what they're talking about. You know, the emissions, obviously China don't care, America don't care. We're just being laughed at.
China have pledged to cut their emissions as well by 2050. And as Wes Streeting was saying there, this is the biggest threat that humanity is facing. We need to have some leadership. Is it good that we've stepped into this vacuum in COP29, or do you think he's on a hiding to nothing?
I don't think there's any point bashing Keir Starmer for the sake of it. I completely get why he's gone over there. In terms of the priority list, it's quite interesting what they've done in the reframing of it, in terms of I'm going over there because actually in a kind of slightly one step removed away, he's showing like the patriotic cause for going over there, and it will help with the economy and improving people's quality of life. Net zero isn't something I want to inflict on individuals. That's something for the private sector.
And I mean, they've got Scottish Power to invest $1 billion yesterday.
So that's quite smart from Starmer. What I would say, however, is there is a slight developing theme where you could argue he's slightly running away to his voter base because he doesn't feel like he's the most popular. You get the sense that he's kind of taken aback by, I'm not very popular.
Yeah, well, I mean, the Conservatives have just taken over, 2-point lead over Labour in the latest poll I saw this morning. The Badenoch bounce, it's being called.
He's not helping himself at all, though. That's what I think with Keir Starmer.
Interesting. Well, on that theme, should we talk about Sue Gray? Did she turn down the gig, or did she get the mood that actually Starmer was about to retract the offer to be the Nations and Regions envoy? And does anybody care that Sue Gray is retreating from public life?
It's all so ridiculous. I remember, I think I came on the show the day after she resigned, and I think you called it out, Eamonn, at the time. Like, this job was never real. It was a PR kind of press release, face-saving device that would last about a week and would drift on, and as it's borne out. It was just, it's completely farcical. I think the people around Sue Gray, yesterday said, oh, she's had a look and she's made a judgment call now after a month or so, and it's not quite right for her. It's a complete waste of everybody's time. It's probably something that if people paid enough attention to, it's the last thing people want from politicians and politics.
I was on a plane a couple of weeks ago, and I'm pretty sure she was on it, and I wanted to talk to her, but the way it boarded, that didn't happen. But she's a very, very interesting woman. As to the talk now is she will get a place in the House of Lords for doing what?
Ousting Boris.
It's too early to get me on that. Well, yeah, I mean...
That's what it would be for, wouldn't it? Yeah.
All jokes aside, that is what she would be remembered for. And that probably alone.
Guys, thank you very much indeed. The guys will be back in about 50 minutes, I should say.
That'll be a quick turnaround.
Paula London, Oscar Redrop, thank you very much indeed.
Yeah, let's check in with Alex Deakin now for the forecast. It is chilly out there.
A nice bright morning will generate a lovely warm day, right through to the evening. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Morning, welcome along to your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. Again, it's a bit chilly out there this morning. Some fog patches around as well. Most of us having a dry day, and for some, there'll be some pleasant autumn sunshine. But first off, we do have to get rid of the fog. And for Western Scotland and Northern Ireland, not a lot of sunshine on offer here. Thicker cloud and at times some drizzly rain. We've lost a shower from the far southeast, still a small chance of one this morning, but generally it's going to be dry across England and Wales. Some patches of cloud and some stubborn fog patches, but much of southern England, eastern England and parts of eastern Scotland seeing some lengthy spells of sunshine, lifting the temperatures to 11, 12 degrees Celsius, so about average for the time of year. Feeling colder, though, where it does stay fairly gloomy. And it's going to be quite a grey day in western Scotland. Rain and drizzle on and off along the coast here. Probably staying dry, though, through the central belt and across the northeast. Decent chance of some sunny spells. Quite a drab day for Northern Ireland. Lots of cloud here. Misty and murky conditions persisting for most of the day. Staying quite grey for northwest England and North Wales. And some stubborn zones of cloud across the Midlands. But elsewhere, I say, many places, South Wales, southern England, east eastern England seeing a fair bit of sunshine. The cloud will continue to drift southwards as we go through the night. That will help to keep the temperatures up, so it won't be as cold tonight as recent nights. Some holds here and there across Scotland could allow those temperatures to dip down close to freezing, but generally speaking holding up in the mid-single figures for most of us into Thursday. And not as much fog around either first thing on Thursday, but much more in the way of cloud. A duller day, certainly across eastern England and southern England. Again, though, most places dry, but a drizzle here and there over the hills, and we'll see some rain and drizzle at times for northern parts of Northern Ireland, western Scotland, and some showery rain for a time across the Northern Isles. Temperatures, again, mostly getting up to double figures, 10, 11 or 12 Celsius. Signs of things turning colder, though, through this weekend.
We can expect clear skies, leading to a light and warm day ahead. Lovely. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good morning, I'm Russell Holding. Train services between Selby and Doncaster are diverting via Goole again today because of a points failure at Selby, with buses running instead between Doncaster and Howden. Now, trains have been stopped between Sleaford and Boston. That's because of an incident at Hubbart's Bridge. Trains are also not stopping between Leicester and Barrow-upon-Soar because of a signalling problem at Syston, with some trains being cancelled completely. In Essex, on the A12, the northbound exit at junction 19 at the Boreham interchange near Chelmsford's closed, where a lorry's overturned on the roundabout. In London, Regent Street is closed southbound from Cavendish Place to Oxford Circus for emergency water main repairs. Cockspur Street's closed off Trafalgar Square for emergency repairs, and there are delays of up to 40 minutes to trains between Wimbledon and Waterloo. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News, the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently. It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it? It's explosive. I mean, this is very good. It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial. And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born. It's everything you need to kickstart your evening. Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it. That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good morning. A divided Church of England in crisis.
The Archbishop of Canterbury resigns as more senior clergy are named in this child sex abuse scandal.
Justin Welby admits it's brought a profound sense of shame upon the Church.
So, who's next in line to become the new Archbishop?
Can Labour's reforms fix the NHS? The Health Secretary is set to name and shame poor-performing hospitals as critics fear vulnerable patients will suffer. We heard from the Health Secretary earlier.
We've got consistent underperformance to make sure that we're taking action and we're not just allowing people to coast along, drifting and failing, but we move them on to do something else.
Donald Trump appoints Elon Musk as co-lead of a new efficiency department that he hopes will dismantle bureaucracy in the White House.
We'll be meeting the winner of the James Dyson Award, whose invention is helping those undergoing chemotherapy.
As other nations give the COP29 climate conference the cold shoulder, we're asking, should Britain lead the charge towards net zero?
And sport this morning, Gary Lineker confirms he will finish on Match of the Day at the end of the season. At 58, Mike Tyson gets ready for his first fight in 19 years against a 31-year-old, and the race that tests resilience and fortitude in very cold temperatures.
Chilly out there again this morning, and once more some quite thick fog patches, but the dry November continues, and some of us will see a bit of sunshine. To find out where, join me later for a full forecast.
Hello there, very good morning to you. I'm Eamonn Holmes.
I'm Isabel Webster, and this is GB News Breakfast.
So Mike Tyson's going to fight a guy who's half his age.
Yeah. Jake Paul, YouTuber, very, very rich. So, and this Jake Paul, so he's 31, and he does these, they're like white-collar fighting, and now he's taking it really seriously. But he's now one of the most, the richest sports people in the world, although he's not even properly a sports person. Whereas Mike Tyson hasn't fought in 19 years, he's 58. You know...
What could possibly go wrong?
I know. I'm not sure who I'm more worried about out of the two of them.
I think probably Mike Tyson.
Do you think?
Just with age, you know. 58, your bones aren't quite what they were when you take a...
Well, his bones were something.
Yeah.
I slept in the same bed as Mike Tyson.
Did you really?
Yes. So I went to the
Big spoon or little spoon?
What?
Were you spooning?
Did he have his boxing gloves on?
No, as I checked into the hotel, they said to me, Mike Tyson slept in that bed last night.
Oh, I see. You weren't in it at the same time. Oh, there you go.
Because I hear he takes all the space.
No, I tell you, but you see, the thing was, having then got into the bed in the Midland Hotel, the bed, every time you moved in any direction, made incredible squeaky noises. It was a wooden bed.
Are you suggesting he'd broken it?
Well, he loosened it. Let's just say he'd done that, to the point it was like unbearable to sleep in every day.
Oh, really? Oh,
yeah.
Sounds like you want to fight him.
Yeah, that was that. So he can make the most of the beds.
Right, OK,
It's going to be compelling viewing, that one.
Speak later, my friend. Thank you.
Good.
Right, our top story this morning. The Archbishop of Canterbury announced his resignation yesterday following that damning report into a prolific child abuser associated with the Church of England.
The review found that Justin Welby could and should have reported John Smythe's abuse of boys and young men in 2013.
Well, victims have now called on further clergymen to resign as the Church looks to appoint a new Archbishop of Canterbury.
Now, earlier we spoke to the Reverend Michael Corran.
It was the right thing for him to resign, but it took him long enough to do so. And there were so many people in the clergy and in congregations who were speaking out. Only one bishop, though, which I think is extremely relevant. Only one bishop had the courage to come forward, the Bishop of Newcastle, and say, you have to resign. But this has been going on for a long time. People knew as early as the 1980s, and certainly by 2013 it was known. So there have to be more people involved. And look, I don't know the Archbishop of Canterbury. I'm sure he's actually a decent man. He failed in particular ways, and he's resigned. But what would be wrong would be to say, well, they've got their man now and it's all over. There's a systemic problem here. How did this abuse occur? How was it allowed to continue when other people knew about it? It's not just the Church of England, other religious organisations, not just religious organisations, sports clubs and the family, social clubs and so on. Abuse occurs when there's power, when there are vulnerable people, and when other people do not speak out and say there is a crime occurring here and it must stop. And that's what happened here. People obviously knew, and they did not stand up and be brave enough to say, no, enough. We have to report this person to the police.
It's interesting listening to you, Reverend Corran, talking about where else this exists. If this is endemic in society, I must admit, if I was sitting on any official board, I would just assume the chances are this person is guilty. The chances are this is happening. Let's look at this very, very seriously.
Well, look, there is a difference, and I think we've got to acknowledge this, and I sit here wearing a collar as a priest, and it's very painful to say this, but there is a difference when it comes to the church committing abuse, because as horrific as it is anywhere, when it comes to faith and church and membership of a religious organization, people have absolute trust and faith. They assume that they'll be safe. The last thing these young men were safe, but they thought they would be. We had in the Roman Catholic abuse crisis, children going home and saying, "Father did this to me." And then saying, how could you say such a thing? He would never do that to you. They believed the priest rather than their own child. Not because they were bad people, because they were trusting people. And it would be terrible if people lost trust in the clergy and in the church. That's why the Archbishop had to resign. It wasn't about him. It was the fact that, look, I'm speaking to you from Canada. It's not quite as bad here, but of course we are linked to the Church of England. The Anglican Communion we're part of that. People were saying to me, well, do we believe this anymore? Do we believe that anymore? Should we take what you say to be true? Because if the most powerful man in the church hasn't come forward to speak truth to power, if you like, then what should we really take as being gospel truth, if you'll forgive the pun? Great damage has been done. There is no denying that.
The Health Secretary is set to name and shame poor-performing hospitals in a bid to tackle the ongoing NHS crisis.
Critics have warned the introduction, though, of these league tables will fail to address the root cause of the problems, with many fearing vulnerable patients could suffer as a result.
Wes Streeting had this to say.
Rewarding the highest performers by letting go of the top-down centralisation and control, which is excessive in the NHS, supporting those leaders who are in challenging areas where performance is nowhere near as good as we would like it to be, and where their performance falls short of the leaders of the pack, and where we've got consistent underperformance, to make sure that we're taking action and we're not just allowing people to coast along, drifting and failing, but we move them on to do something else.
Well, let's get the thoughts this morning of Tom Slater, who joins us in the studio with his analysis. Good morning again to you, Tom. Interesting to hear from the Health Secretary. He gives such long answers, it's impossible to ask all the questions that I wanted to ask of him. But, you know, clearly sincere in his conviction that he wants to try and change the NHS, which is clearly in need of change. But is this the revolution we've all been waiting for?
Oh, absolutely not. And with Wes Streeting, there's always a big gap between, I think, the rhetoric and the detail. If you look at these particular proposals, they're nothing particularly revolutionary. I mean, Alan Milburn, who was the Health Secretary under New Labour, who's also a big advisor to Wes Streeting, had previously rolled out a plan like this in 2001. They ended up scrapping it by 2005, so it can't have been that effective. And essentially, you know, we've got a health service that, as we know, is taking up huge amounts of money, is failing to deliver for patients, huge historic waiting lists. You know, the last organisation after Hezbollah to still rely on pages and really outdated technology. The idea that a few kind of whiz-bang league tables and fiddling with the incentives are going to sort that out. Maybe they'll be useful around the edges, who knows? But is it the big reforms that we have been led to believe are coming down the pipe? Almost certainly not.
And this suggestion that, you know, being able to turn off the taps for the use of locums and nurses wasn't something that I got a sense he really had a solution for, given there is a retention and recruitment problem for staff within the NHS. If they know they're going to be pitted against each other, Royal College of Nursing saying this should never happen to staff working in the NHS, it's only going to demoralise them, that's going to exacerbate the problem, isn't it?
No, absolutely. And I think you saw in his inability to answer that question the fact that they can make a lot of noise about this particular issue, but unless they had, you know, got a time machine and can go back and sort out the longer-term issues in terms of staffing, which have led to a situation which they're overly reliant on these locum staff and these out-of-hours workers. There's not much they can do at this point in time, but that's always the problem with the health service, isn't it? Is that you've got politicians chasing a 24-hour news cycle, you've got governments looking at the 4- and 5-year prospectus, whereas these issues and these problems have a much longer tail than that.
We also asked him about the pledge to cut emissions by 81% in just over 10 years, and I asked him whether or not, you know, we could trust Keir Starmer when he said he's not going to tell people how to live their lives. Our audience deeply sceptical that that's possible. I mean, they're trying to lean on the private sector on this, but we're all going to have to change our ways, aren't we, if we can achieve that kind of cut?
I know, and this is an open secret, really. If you look at what the Climate Change Committee, the kind of the governmental organisation which is very much charged with basically enforcing our climate targets. They've made this very clear. You look at the information that they put out, they say that much of this has to come from behaviour change, which is a kind of euphemism for people driving less, travelling less, doing less, changing how they eat and so on. But the politicians always try to pretend that there's just going to be some sort of whiz-bang technology that will come along and mean that we can experience the same level of prosperity without having to make those changes. If they want to hit these swinging targets, it's going to look like people doing and enjoying themselves less, but they never want to admit that.
And is it contributing to the Badenoch bounce? I read it in one poll this morning, the More in Common poll, that the Conservatives have now taken over Labour by 2 points.
I mean, it's just incredible how short this honeymoon period has been, but I don't think anyone really could have been surprised. I mean, the Tories were always going to get their act together to a certain extent, and also this is an incredibly unpopular Labour government that was only really elected in by about 20% of the voting public at the election. So I'm struck by how quickly it started to unravel, but I don't think anyone can be surprised by those polling numbers.
OK. Editor of Spiked Online, Tom Slater, thanks very much indeed.
Thank you. Time 11 minutes past 7, so to our poll of the day, which is about Keir Starmer, asking you, is he right to commit the UK to cutting greenhouse gases by 81% over 10 years?
Yeah, we'll bring you the live results throughout the day. The final results, as always, in Martin Daubney's show this afternoon, but we'll have our own summary of your thoughts after watching breakfast just after 9 o'clock. If you haven't already cast a vote, where have you been? You just need to go to our website, gbnews.com/poll.
OK, let's check in with Alex Deacon and find out what the weather is due to do today. Alex.
Heavy showers first thing will be followed by a warm, cosy day. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Morning, welcome along to your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. Again, it's a bit chilly out there this morning. Some fog patches around as well. Most of us having a dry day, and for some, there'll be some pleasant autumn sunshine. But first off, we do have to get rid of the fog. And for Western Scotland and Northern Ireland, not a lot of sunshine on offer here. Thicker cloud and at times some drizzly rain. We've lost a shower from the far southeast, still a small chance of one this morning, but generally it's going to be dry across England and Wales. Some patches of cloud and some stubborn fog patches, but much of southern England, eastern England and parts of eastern Scotland seeing some lengthy spells of sunshine, lifting the temperatures to 11, 12 degrees Celsius, so about average for the time of year. Feeling colder, though, where it does stay fairly gloomy. And it's going to be quite a grey day in western Scotland. Rain and drizzle on and off along the coast here. Probably staying dry, though, through the central belt and across the northeast. Decent chance of some sunny spells. Quite a drab day for Northern Ireland. Lots of cloud here. Misty and murky conditions persisting for most of the day. Staying quite grey for northwest England and North Wales. And some stubborn zones of cloud across the Midlands. But elsewhere, I say, many places, South Wales, southern England, eastern England, seeing a fair bit of sunshine. The cloud will continue to drift southwards as we go through the night. That will help to keep the temperatures up, so it won't be as cold tonight as recent nights. Some holds here and there across Scotland could allow those temperatures to dip down close to freezing, but generally speaking, holding up in the mid-single figures for most of us into Thursday. And not as much fog around either first thing on Thursday, but much more in the way of cloud. A duller day, certainly across eastern England and southern England. Again, though, most places dry, but a drizzle here and there over the hills, and we'll see some rain and drizzle at times for northern parts of Northern Ireland, western Scotland, and some showery rain for a time across the Northern Isles. Temperatures, again, mostly getting up to double figures, 10, 11 or 12 Celsius. Signs of things turning colder, though, through this weekend.
Expect a warm front, moving from the kitchen right through to the rest of the house. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
And Isabel was telling me it's going to get a bit frostier and
Might
colder
snow
next week.
Yeah, I was reading snow could be on the way.
So just put you in the mood for Christmas, perhaps, and we can decorate your celebrations with £25,000 and 25 pence.
Yes, plus shopping vouchers and a GB News goodie bag. What could be nicer? Make sure you're in it if you want to win it.
You could win.
I'm Michael Portillo. This is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Why go out on a Friday night when Friday night comes straight to your home?
Talking about?
Join me and my A-team of top pundits. Chemistry tonight is electric. As we tackle the big stories of the day with wit, insight and fearless energy.
Man of the people.
It's all vibe.
Just a filing cabinet on wheels with a tie on.
So, order in Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, every Friday at 8, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute? Kick it up a gear with GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+ and on the GB News app. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player app. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with GB News Radio. We are the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/your-say. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday, we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday, we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Emily Carver. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
OK, so one of the subjects we're talking about today is an 81% cut in carbon emissions in just over 10 years' time. This was announced by the Prime Minister at the COP29 conference.
Well, the Prime Minister said his main mission at the summit was to show leadership. As other nations have given the conference the cold shoulder, we're asking, should we be leading the charge towards net zero?
OK, let's debate this now with environmental auditor and campaigner Donncha McCarthy and head of policy of the Global Warming Foundation, Harry Wilkinson. Harry, why should we not be pursuing such a noble ambition?
Well, it's about having a bit of humility here. We've heard from MPs and from our prime ministers over the years that would be showing global climate leadership at these conferences. But what have we had to show for it? You know, we've ended up with the most expensive electricity prices in the world, both for domestic and industrial consumers. So we have to think, you know, why would countries want to be copying us when our approach has been so disastrous? We don't know that we're on track to meet current targets, and now we're in the business of setting yet another target. Without knowing how achievable it is and how much it's going to cost consumers.
Donncha, what would you say in response?
Well, Harry, obviously, on behalf of the Global Warming Foundation, speaks on behalf of the US and American oil billionaires who want to keep the UK addicted to the oil industry. Last year, during the oil crisis, we had to spend £70 billion in subsidies to bail out consumers. What Harry economically always does, he talks about the cost of investment, but never talks about the benefits. So, for example, since 2020, UK consumers have had their electricity consumption cut by 30% by net zero investment in energy efficiency. So that's been a real positive for UK consumers. And the second thing he never counts is the cost for UK economy. Farmers last year lost 20% of their income because of extreme weather. Our coastal we're having to spend billions on protecting our coastal towns and land from rising seas. So we can't afford not to act on climate change. And the good news, Eamonn, is that it benefits the economy. We already have 640,000 green jobs in the UK. That compares to 30,000 jobs in the oil industry. Harry wants us to destroy the renewable industry. They produced a report a couple of months ago saying, wipe out the green jobs. This is the economic
Donica, I understand, and Harry, I'll put this to you. I understand getting the targets down and becoming online with all of that, but does it make a darn bit of difference what we do in a country as tiny as Britain?
Well, to be able to actually really show that climate leadership, we have to actually be a country that people want to copy. Donica was talking about a crisis last year where we did see fossil fuels spike very high, but what we've seen is a sustained increase in energy prices over many years because of all the renewables that have been subsidized on the system, because of those increasing balancing costs to supply backup when the wind isn't blowing. So these costs have been real, they've been substantial, they've been significant. Donica seems to want to downplay these costs, and that's very unfortunate. I'm no particular fan of fossil fuels. I don't want to promote them, as Donica seems to be saying. What I want is to have competition and to develop that competitive energy market so we can actually discover, what the cheapest way to provide energy to bring down carbon emissions and also bring down bills. If we had that competitive market, then we'd be pioneering a new approach that other countries might want to copy.
Shaking his head
we're
there.
saying how much can we hurt ourselves? And of course, countries aren't going to want to copy that.
Harry is talking out through both sides of this matter. They produced a report last month that literally proposed closing down the renewable industry and reverting back to 100% fossil-fueled economy. And the other thing that they did is they campaigned vigorously to destroy the investment in home energy efficiency and succeeded when they actually destroyed what they call the green crab. That meant that 9 million householders in Britain had to pay massively more expensive energy bills last year because his organisation waged war on home insulation. What we need to do, of course, is face on. But there is an important point for COP. What we absolutely have to ensure is that poor people do not pay the price for the oil billionaire transition. And what Brazil is proposing, and they're the head of COP next year, is they're proposing a tiny 1% levy on the 100 richest families in the world. That would produce 250 billion, which is 2.5 times what governments are currently funding for the transition. And that would help us transition to a clean energy economy that protects our environment, protects our farmers, and protects the poor.
Final question to both of you. Harry, first of all, is this target achievable?
Well, we don't know. It's likely to be very expensive. We haven't seen any plan. We haven't seen any cost-benefit analysis. And when we look at this, the government tends to use what they call target-compliant carbon values. So they're actually marking their own homework. They're saying, what is the price of carbon that we need to achieve this, rather than saying, what is the damage that carbon actually does to the environment, and how do we have policies that actually have more benefits.
Harry, is it achievable?
Donica. Sorry, it is achievable.
Sorry, Donica, sorry.
It is achievable, Liam, but it will actually require a huge effort. Where the government's going to have real challenges is the electricity is easy. We're nearly there already. Only 28% of our electricity is now coming from fossil fuels. So that's achievable by 2030. And it is predicted we'll be a net exporter of green electricity by 2030. So that's going to be a positive. The real challenge is meat and flights. Can we persuade British people to eat a healthier, more plant-based diet? And secondly, can we persuade people to holiday more in the UK, benefiting the UK economy? Those will be the two challenges for this target, in my opinion.
Interesting. OK, thank you both very much indeed for that. I just want to finish by drawing everyone's attention to a tweet I spotted yesterday from Zach Goldsmith, who was, of course, Environment Minister underneath Boris Johnson. And he's in Baku for COP29. And an unexpected, perhaps, and unpredictable notable fan of David Lammy. He said there are 5 David Lammy clones everywhere at COP, making a huge and hugely positive impression. I can't exaggerate how great it is to have such a senior figure drag the focus away from the technocratic, one-dimensional focus on carbon counting towards championing the actual natural world. He said we can't have a hope of stabilising the climate without it. It's wonderful to see, and so good to have the UK back and leading on this. So there we go.
27 minutes coming up to 27 minutes past 7 o'clock on this Wednesday morning. Mike Tyson's due to his first fight in 19 years when he faces YouTuber Jake Paul. Paul Coit will be officiating on that.
Yeah,
next.
he won't be boxing him.
The latest GB News travel.
Good morning, I'm Russell Holding. Trains between Selby and Doncaster are diverting via Goole again today because of a points failure, with buses running between Doncaster and Howden, and trains have been stopped between Boston and Sleaford because of an incident. In Staffordshire, the A460 is partly blocked each way after an accident and fuel spill between Hensford and Rugeley. Trains have been stopped between Leicester and Loughborough because of a signalling problem. In Essex on the A12, the northbound exit at junction 19 near Chelmsford's closed where a lorry's overturned. On the M25 in Essex, there are anti-clockwise queues towards junction 28 for the A12. After traffic was stopped because of an accident, there are queues back beyond junction 29 for the A127. In London, Regent Street's closed southbound towards Oxford Circus, and Cockspur Street's closed each way off Trafalgar Square for emergency water main repairs. And on the M4 in Berkshire, the eastbound exit at junction 4B for the M25 is blocked by an accident causing queues.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Mark Dolan tonight is your weekend dose of news, debate and entertainment. This sounds like a wild conspiracy theory. Don't miss My Big Opinion, Mark Meets, and My Take at 10. Democracy is a funny old thing. And we don't do boring, not on my watch. I just won't have it. Let's go and get another glass of that bubbly. You've earned it. That's Mark Dolan tonight, Saturday and Sunday, 9 to 11, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the arguments. We get rid of the disrespect, and then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more. Whether it's breaking royal news, Will, please bring us up to date, or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently. It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it? It's explosive. I mean, this is very good. It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Let's talk to Paul Coit, shall we, with all the latest sports news. What have you got for us?
Well, we'll do a tiny bit on Match of the Day, because we've got Mark Lawrenson, who was on Match of the Day for many years. He's going to join us about 8:30. So where we are at the moment is that Gary Lineker, yes, he's confirmed that he is going to leave Match of the Day. And it seems that at the moment the idea is that it will be a job share, which is what I kind of expected, because when you've got such a big show like that, and then you've had Lineker that's been at the helm for 25 years... It's a big deal for one person to fill those shoes, and I think it's going to be a situation where, OK, Mark Chapman and then maybe Kelly Summers, and maybe they'll move it around a bit.
Just goes to show how overpaid, I suppose, you could say Gary Lineker is, if you can replace it with two people and it's still a cost
Probably
saving.
will be. Yeah, I think it probably will be. I still think Eamonn should have got the gig myself.
Oh, you'd have been brilliant, yeah.
Yeah. It'd be great.
Nobody knows more about football.
Yeah, absolutely.
Or maybe Gary Lineker, I don't know.
Absolutely.
You see, but again, they also do this ridiculous thing in the BBC. It's always been the case. Try and get a younger audience So what does that mean? Do you get a younger host?
Yeah.
And younger people don't watch television, so why are they wasting their
They
time?
do Match of the Day, though, don't they? People do still tune. They watch it on Sunday morning in bed.
No, they don't.
With a
They watch it
hangover
on
or
their
whatever.
phones and they watch it on devices.
They're so different. Yeah, that's right. And the thing is, how is that going to go? Is it going to be a situation where if it's a different host, they're not going to bother? There's something about it being an institution that you will watch it on a Saturday. Well, we'll see. But it's the end of the season. He'll leave, but he'll stay at the BBC, and then we'll present right up until the World Cup. So we'll do all the live stuff.
Best thing about Match of the Day?
Music.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Agree.
Hasn't changed all these years, although they did try and change it. Do you remember that? I don't know. It was. I couldn't even tell you when it was, but they tried to change the theme. And everybody was up in arms. They'd had basically the same music, but then re-recorded it to try and fit in with a younger audience.
I just can't believe you two haven't burst into tune yet. This is most unlikely. It's hard to hum.
See, I'm more of a big match theme.
Yeah.
Or the one before that. The one before that, which was. That's a great thing.
Look at those endorphins. Just.
You know what? I always imagine the band. Can you imagine when they're recording that? They go, "Oh, I can really feel this. Come on." Right. Let's look at. Do you want to do the boxing here? This is a bizarre one. We did mention it at the top of the hour, didn't we? Yeah. Mike Tyson is 58 years old. He's fighting Jake Paul, YouTuber. It's going to be on Netflix. Is it the future of boxing? It seems...
It's a gimmick. It
is a gimmick, but it sells and it makes so much money. Yeah. And people are so interested in it. Now, Eddie Hearn called it dangerous, irresponsible... and disrespectful to boxing, and he won't be watching. But unfortunately... in these situations, and I say, it's a disgrace, and it's 50 years since the Rumble in the Jungle. You think of Muhammad Ali fighting George Foreman, one of the greatest fights of all time. Are we now reduced to that? But now I'm going to find myself thinking, but it's almost like watching a car crash. You're sort of like, you're looking out this thinking...
But it's not the future of boxing, because someone's going to be seriously injured, and I suspect it'll be Tyson.
Well... it could go either way, because when you've got a great boxer, you never forget how to throw a punch. So he could... You know what? I had a great uncle who was about 90 years old, and he lived in Brighton. This is about 20, 30 years ago. And he was a boxer. He was a very good boxer. And he was walking along the seafront in Brighton, and someone tried to mug him. And he went... hit the guy right on the chin, knocked him out. You never forget how to throw a punch. No. So,
but can you take a punch as you get older? That's my concern.
You could
I
be.
don't know.
I don't know.
Sure.
It could be. And it's one of those things. If anything does go wrong, then that's going to be end, and maybe we'll go back to proper professional boxing again. But it is. But when you look at the money he's going to earn, Paul is going to earn 31 million. This is in pounds. Mike Tyson's going to earn 15 million from this. Iron Mike, in his day, was unstoppable, but that was a long time ago. It wasn't.
Who have you got birthday-wise?
Have we got birthdays? Hopefully.
Have you? No.
We have, I've got some birthdays. Yeah, I believe I've got some birthdays for you. And some big names as well. Do we have?
Here we go.
Do we have the first one? Oh, there we are. It's your favourite.
Eamonn's favourite.
It's Emma Raducanu.
She's very young.
21.
21? Still only 21, you think?
Yeah.
She's been playing now for 15 years. 22 is the correct answer. 22, Emma Raducanu. Let's go with another one. We've got one. Oh, there we are. Let's Lando Norris. Oh. By the way, you always mention the name Lando and think, well, where did Lando come from? Lando is a Spanish name which means...
land.
Famous land.
Famous land?
Famous land. Lando is famous land.
Makes me think of Land of Hope and Glory.
Lando.
Hope and glory.
Hope and glory. Anyway, he's got not quite the glory, but he has got hope when it comes to the Drivers' Championship this year, because he's second at the moment. But how old is Lando Hope and Glory today?
29.
29?
24.
25.
Ugh.
25.
Right, Eamonn wins.
By the way, I've got one more, but I'm going to tell you who it is.
Save it. Go on then.
I'll tell you, Ron Chopper Harris. It's one for Eamonn. Chopper Harris, one of the hardest footballers. No, Ron's still alive. Sorry, Ron.
Yeah.
He's still alive. He's still with us. He's Ron.
Like to run into Ron.
I know, especially now after you said that.
Yeah, exactly.
But how old is Chopper Harris today? Played for Chelsea in the 60s. More goals for Chelsea than anybody else.
He'll be 77.
82.
80 is the answer.
Well done.
Oh.
Happy birthday, Ron.
Happy birthday, alive and well.
Thank you very much indeed, Paul.
Pleasure.
Thank you very much.
How old are you? Oh, that's a lot.
Same age as Mike Tyson?
Yeah, probably the same age as Jake Paul, I reckon.
Oh, right, yeah, of course.
We've got the Energy Secretary. We just break off
Shadow,
from Paul there.
yeah.
We've got Claire Coutinho, and that's next.
Nightmare commute? Kick it up a gear with GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, and on the GB News app. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with GB News Radio. We are the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Catherine Richards and Jake Singleton-Hill featured on the reality show Love is Blind.
Well, Catherine and Jake are joining us now in the studio for Saturday Morning Live. Thank you very much for joining us. And this is perhaps not the end result that people might have thought that they'd be seeing at this point, because you were both on the show, but you didn't fall in love in the pods, did you?
No, we didn't. I rejected him.
You guys look great together.
Yeah.
Very happy as well. It seemed like you guys were really strong, and it almost seemed like Freddie, after he admitted to you that he'd cheated in the past.
I actually respected the fact that he told me up front. I didn't even want to have that conversation. Obviously, that was a conversation that we got told to talk about. And I respected his decision, but I think he felt that I was holding this grudge towards him that she really doesn't like, and which was not, and he knew this, because off camera we had many conversations where I was like, thank you for owning up, like, we can just move on from this. But if anything, I think he just felt guilty the whole entire time, and he put that on me, which is fine, but yeah, there's obviously a lot that people don't see.
So for viewers who don't know, Love is Blind is where you go and seek love and romance, but you don't see who you're speaking to, right?
No.
So, Jake, why did you go on the show?
My parents actually met in a very similar way. So my stepdad was texting my mum. He'd basically stolen the number off of a friend because the friend had met my mum in Blackpool, and they were texting for like 6 months. They'd never met. So that premise of how they got together and the marriage that they had was stunning. And to build a relationship not based on looks before you met, I just found that just incredible.
So do you believe in that concept? Is it lust or love at first sight?
It's weird.
It's a bit of both.
I think, it's definitely a bit of both. And I would say, as you get older, your looks will change, but your personality will stay the same.
GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
And we're delighted to welcome Oscar Redrop back into the studio and Paula London as they review stories in the papers, taking up a bit of space. Paula is Elon Musk, and he's got himself a job under Donald Trump.
Well, I'm a huge fan of Elon Musk. A lot of people know that. And I think it's fantastic news. It would have been terrible for him. He would have been finished if Trump lost, though, because a lot of countries are now, the governments are wanting to censor Twitter. So, yeah, I think it's great. And I feel like there's a new energy in the country now, because since Trump has won, I feel like it's going to help, obviously, the whole of the world, because obviously Trump is now the leader of the first world. And I do think it's quite worrying about NATO, though, because they are now almost not threatening, but J.D. Vance has said that if countries in Europe keep threatening to censor Twitter, they'll pull out of NATO. So that is quite scary, but that might be the thing that he needs to do.
Oscar, what do you think about Musk? I mean, he's not going to be answerable to the Senate. He's able to slash regulations which will benefit his private business hugely. He donated an inordinate sum of money to get this access to power. You know, there are some sort of unsavoury smells coming out of that, aren't there?
Yeah, I mean, the guy's a genius. I think that's, an objective fact. I think he's played an absolute kind of strategic blinder in backing Trump like he did. I the jury's very much out. I think it's a temporary 18-month deal they've struck.
Can do a lot in 18 months,
He could do a lot in 18 months. In principle, I really support the idea of cutting waste, just generally speaking, particularly in that country. People feel like they have not been served by politicians. I'm sure a lot of people in this country feel the same as well. Get rid of the bloat. I just have a feeling it will end in tears. I really do. I really strongly do.
I just look at it and I think, how does he have time to make electric cars and...
fly to Mars.
Run Twitter and what does he do?
SpaceX.
SpaceX, yeah.
Tesla.
Yeah. It just strikes me as what seriously could you get involved in any depth?
I really hope it works. And there's like a really kind of... I like the rock and roll aspect of like, we're going to get in, we're going to drain the swamp, we're going to change things. And then often actually like reality hits and actually you can't just throw things in the bin. You see, you can't just, smash
however
buildings down
odd Donald Trump
metaphorically.
may be, there is no doubt about it. Elon Musk, you say he's a genius. He may well be, but he's odd. I don't think you could spend...
He's eccentric, yeah. A lot of geniuses are.
Yeah. You kind of sold him to me a little bit in the green room, I have to say.
Yeah, I think what's very interesting, a lot of people are forgetting that the reason he's so passionate about this sort of right-wing cause, as it were, is because of his son. He thinks he lost his son to wokeness, and that's why he wants to make change for the good.
Right.
That's why he's so passionate. It's not about the money.
Hasn't he named his son like a...
Well, he has many children. I think he has 8
with
something.
numbers. Right?
Yes,
Yeah.
As I say, he's very eccentric, but a lot of... I think he's autistic as well.
That we know of.
Yeah, a lot of very bright people are autistic or, they're just a little different, but I find difference interesting. For me, he's a genius and he doesn't sleep a lot. He has, obviously, a great team, but he has intrinsic satisfaction because he feels like his son was lost to wokeness.
Yeah, but, you've got somebody, as you're alluding to, quite thin-skinned, the president-elect, who, famously falls out with people. You've got someone who's eccentric, who's already had a complete volte-face in terms of his policies. Will these two be able to work together and stay friends? I don't know. People are saying the same about RFK, a big sort of loose cannon, if you like, wild card. Lots of great reforming policies from both of those candidates. But can they stay friendly with such a volatile... sensitive person as Trump? Let's see.
Yeah.
I mean, it's going to be interesting.
They have the same aim. I think J.D. Vance is fantastic. So, our equivalent is Angela Rayner here, and they couldn't be more different. He's very, very strong man, and what he says he's going to do, he'll do.
OK. Let's talk about what we talk about here, Oscar. Telegraph writer in hate crime inquiry.
Yeah, well, it's interesting, the two stories, when you put them alongside each other in terms of Elon Musk's kind of, drive for freedom of expression and free speech. And actually, in this country, when you look at this story, so Alison Pearson had 2 police officers call at home on Remembrance Sunday to tell her they were very vague, telling her she was being investigated over social media posts from over a year ago. They wouldn't go into any specifics.
Yeah.
Look, without knowing the specifics, there is something terrifying about that. I'm not doing the whole Starmer bashing for the sake of it. He's got some things right as Prime Minister. But this clampdown on people writing things online where they can actually have police arrive at their door and, in some cases, have received prison sentences or in prison as we speak, that's wrong. That is wrong. And I don't want to live in a country where... And, the mission creep of that is really scary. If we're here now...
I understand the principle of not wanting to police tweets over the streets. Quite clearly there are not enough policing of the streets is going on.
Yeah.
But at what point does the line get crossed? If somebody has allegedly incited racial violence, is that a free pass? Are you allowed to do that on social media?
I don't think that should be a free pass, but I think... I feel prison sentences pretty uncomfortable. That sits uncomfortably with me, and I agree that line is difficult to draw at times. But it's just from a political perspective, if I was advising Starmer on this, I'd say this is not popular because actually regular people, they don't care where you draw that line necessarily, or they do care where you draw that line, but they want police officers on the street policing real danger and crimes, not this.
Can I also say, if it was that bad, it would have been flagged up a year ago, because people search my tweets trying to find bad things, and I'm pretty careful what I tweet. But if it was that bad, it would have been highlighted then, because people do search her tweets. You know, Alison, I've met her myself. And if that tweet was as bad as the police are alleging, it would have been removed and people would have searched for it. But I just don't think it's fair, because the people on the left, journalists, they say some heinous stuff and they don't seem to be held accountable.
OK. Should we talk about Gordon Brown? He's been talking about this child benefit cap, and he's, you know, given speeches about it and feels very, very strongly about it. He says there's twice as many children living in poverty as pensioners in this country, Paula. It's made the front of the Eye, but pretty much that's the only paper taking this up, because everything else being dominated
well, I mean,
by
maybe,
the Archbishop of Canterbury.
Yeah, maybe I'm old-fashioned, but I just don't think you should have child upon child if you can't afford it. And I believe anyone in a committed relationship should be able to have one child, definitely. Or maybe even two, but one, definitely. But they want over two. I mean, I just think that's insane. If you're not working, why do you expect taxpayers to pay for 1, 2, not just 2, 3, 4, 5, 6?
You've taken the words out of my mouth, and I just think this is really
It's not a radical
natural.
thing, yeah.
If you can't afford them, what normal person would have them? Now, Isabel tends not to agree with me on this, but I just don't think the state should be paying for children.
But it's not paying for children, is it? It's just...
Well, it's aiding. It's giving them money taxpayers are paying. And let's not forget, 1 in 3 children are now born to mothers not born in the UK. And we've got an ever-growing benefit bill.
30% of children born in this country, their parents were not born in the UK.
But we have a fertility problem, don't we? We don't
I know, but we don't want people to think, oh, let's just go to England. We can go there, have as many kids as we like for free, come over in a dinghy, stay here, and then I've got the right to remain.
Charge them over the NHS.
Yeah, everything done. And then taxpayers, markets like us will just pay.
The politics of it is interesting, though, because unless it's like a pre-arranged, and this does happen often, a pre-arranged moment of confrontation and intervention from Gordon Brown, where actually that's interesting in itself, because that suggests that maybe Starmer and his team are willing to find a compromise or give up a bit of ground on this issue. But it's very rare that Gordon Brown kind of makes a campaigning moment. And that will cause... obviously, this is an issue that, amongst the backbenchers, is difficult for Starmer.
I think, I might be wrong, I have a feeling Nigel Farage and Gordon Brown are on the same page on this issue, which might surprise people. I might be wrong.
Yeah, very, very interesting.
So just be clear, what does Brown want? What's he looking for?
He's basically saying that this cap on the child benefit is heinous and basically hurts children and is leaving all these children in poverty.
What does hurt children?
Cycle of problems
is having multiple children without working.
But
it's not just the money. It's not very good role models, is it, having parents that are not working? They probably won't work, and then there's more children not working.
Well, there we go.
I mean, so the whole country's under stress and strain, the resources, the roads, the hospitals, the schools, whatever. And then we have industry saying, oh, the population isn't big enough, we need people to fill jobs, until they get robots, that is, and they won't care.
That's if they're going to work, anyway, so, yeah.
It's very confusing. Why do we need more people?
Well, it's interesting. I was talking to a very, very impressive Indian businesswoman who wanted to start a new business in this country. And the budget has genuinely called that into question for her. And, you know, there is so much, as she put it, there is so much talent that is not utilised in this country because people... And again, it's interesting when you get an external perspective. We're quite soft in this country. People don't work hard in this country, generally speaking, was the perspective. People aren't... We're often not particularly driven sometimes.
We're not like Japan. I mean, people sleep in offices there and things like that.
Yeah.
But
ageing population, though, like in Japan.
Right, Justin Welby, what do you make of what you've seen there? And should he be held responsible? A lot of people say, well, it had nothing to do with him, whatever. I would say, au contraire, if he didn't act upon this, I think he's guilty and he should take responsibility and resign.
Yeah, I'm actually very upset because I'm a Christian and I obviously hold bishops and priests to a much higher standard. But it's happened before. I'm very upset by it, but I thought he should face the force of the law, to be honest with you, because I don't know what's going to happen. But at the end of the day, if he has assisted an offender and perverted the course of justice, you know, those are criminal offences. So
well, hang on, there's no suggestion.
No, if.
Well, yeah.
No, but directly or indirectly.
It was covered up, and 130 boys were involved.
I think there are some questions about where this police investigation is at. You know, nobody's talking about why this guy was able to leave the country, why there was no investigation. As Justin Welby said, the matter had been referred to the police. That had also been referred then to Hampshire Police, where the abuse happened. You know, where are the police today? Why aren't we hearing from them?
Well, if you report something to the police, they will give you a follow-up to what happened. So if they didn't give him a follow-up or said it was closed, you should have wondered why if you knew a lot of information.
I agree. You know, we can get invested in the sometimes the more interesting kind of personalities involved in these things, but the police, it just becomes like instantly that's a police matter, criminal investigation. I think often with these things, people try and I think him holding out a little bit.
That undid his dignity
you don't
a bit.
quite get the moral stand high ground on that front. It should have happened quicker, that resignation.
Looking ahead to Christmas, and a lot of people are organising carol concerts, myself included, if you want to help.
Go on, give it a little puff. You want some more people to come. Go on.
We do. We
Go
need
on.
Just
look up the K9K-9 website where we're... and the little doggies come along to the carol concerts. They'll come along to the church.
How festive.
Yeah.
They can go and admire the crib.
And yes, they can do and have a wee in the straw.
Oh,
or
stop.
whatever.
You always ruin it.
So anyway, the Princess of Wales, good to see. She's got her carol concert back on this year. Oscar, what have you got to tell us about that?
Well, yeah, so on the 6th of December, big Christmas concert at Westminster Abbey. It will specialise the service in reflecting on the importance of love and empathy. I think this will be quite, relatively quite a big moment. I think, obviously, the year or so that the Princess of Wales has had and what she means to people in this country, I think this could be a real kind of royal moment, actually.
It's been an annus horribilis, hasn't it, for the royal family? If you think the King's had cancer, the Princess of Wales had cancer, the Queen's recently had a chest infection, all the drama with Harry, all the drama with Andrew.
It's like a soap opera.
It is, and, William has said it's been the worst year of his life. And that's something to say, given that he lost his mum in a horrific car crash as a child. That is a big thing to say. Will this be able to draw a line under it? I hope so, and I hope people are kind towards her, because some people were not so kind.
Yes, don't we know? Yes.
Yeah, crazy. And actually, sometimes you don't realise what you have until it's like, and the absence of her in public life. I think when it slowly, gradually returns, I think people will kind of, really feel that benefit and go, she's back, and actually, this is what we love about her in this country.
And people forget the King's the titular head of the Church of England, so it's good that we're celebrating a Christian holiday as well, because quite a lot of Christmas events have been cancelled.
Guys, just got to leave it there. We've got to go to the break.
Yes, after the break, we're going to be speaking to Claire Coutinho. She is the Shadow Secretary of State for Climate Change and Net Zero. We'll get all her thoughts on what Sir Keir Starmer has been saying at COP29 and all of the other big stories of the day. Don't move a muscle. Thank you very much to Oscar and to you as well. Thank you. Bye-bye.
The latest GB News travel.
Good morning, I'm Russell Holding. Train services between Selby and Doncaster are diverting via Goole again today because of a points failure, with buses replacing trains between Doncaster and Howden, and trains have been stopped between Sleaford and Boston because of an incident. In Staffordshire, the A460 is blocked each way by an accident and fuel spill between Hensford and Rugeley, causing delays. Trains aren't stopping between Leicester and Loughborough because of a signalling problem. In Buckinghamshire, the A5 is partly blocked south of Milton Keynes for emergency repairs, causing delays. In Essex, on the A12, the northbound exit at junction 19 near Chelmsford's closed where a lorry's overturned. The M25 in Essex is blocked anti-clockwise by an accident between junctions 29 and 28 from the A127 to the A12, with queues halfway back to junction 30 for the A13. And in London, Regent Street's closed southbound towards Oxford Circus, and Cockspur Street's closed off Trafalgar Square for emergency repairs.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
A very good morning to you. The Church of England in crisis.
The Archbishop of Canterbury resigns as more senior clergy are named in the child sex abuse scandal.
Justin Welby admits it's brought a profound sense of shame upon the Church.
So, who is next in line to take over?
Can Labour's reforms fix the NHS? The Health Secretary is set to name and shame poor performing hospitals as critics fear vulnerable patients will suffer. Wes Streeting had this to say.
We've got consistent underperformance to make sure that we're taking action and we're not just allowing people to coast along, drifting and failing, but we move them on to do something else.
Donald Trump appoints Elon Musk as co-lead of a new efficiency department that he hopes will dismantle bureaucracy in the White House.
We'll be meeting the winner of the James Dyson Award, whose invention is helping those undergoing chemotherapy.
And as other nations give the COP29 climate conference the cold shoulder, we're asking you this morning about whether or not the UK should be leading the charge towards net zero.
And in sport this morning, Premier League referee David Coote's not the only person suspended from his job. After that video, I wonder what Jurgen Klopp thinks. Michael van Gerwen is knocked out of the Grand Slam of darts. And with Gary Lineker leaving match of the day, legend Mark Lawrenson from the show joins us in 20 minutes.
Chilly out there again this morning, and once more some quite thick fog patches, but the dry November continues and some of us will see a bit of sunshine. To find out where, join me later for a full forecast.
On this Wednesday morning, the time's approaching 8 o'clock. I'm Eamonn Holmes.
I'm Isabel Webster and this is GB News Breakfast. Well, we start this hour by speaking to the Shadow Energy and Net Zero Secretary, Claire Coutinho. Good morning to you. Thanks very much for joining us. I notice you're not in Azerbaijan yourself, decided not to attend COP29. Is that an indication of Kemi Badenoch's direction of travel on net zero?
No, that's not an indication of anything. But I would say it's really important that if you look at what Keir Starmer has done at COP, is he signed us up to a new target of 81% emissions reduction without telling the public what that will mean for them. And we don't know whether that means, for example, that they'll have to accelerate their diet changes away from meat and dairy, whether it will mean less travel by plane and car, whether it will mean higher energy bills. And that's what I think is so deeply wrong. I was brought in last year to be Energy and Net Zero Secretary because we said we wanted to be much more honest about the trade-offs when we come up with these targets and what it will mean for the British public.
Well, he said that he wants to create a green economy which will create jobs and hopefully, he says, growth and will help to tackle one of the biggest problems that's facing us. I mean, how can you object to that?
Well, the IFS, just a couple of weeks ago when they announced the budget, said actually their green plans, which are going to spend billions, will not lead to more growth. And that's what I worry about, is that what we are doing in this country is ramping up the cost of energy, creating more hardship for the British people. And all you are going to see is jobs and industry move abroad to places like China, which are still 60% powered by coal. And that's much worse for emissions. It's going to mean fewer jobs in Britain and more carbon in the atmosphere. And that's completely counterproductive. So I'm not saying that we shouldn't play our part in a the climate change challenge. But what I'm saying is we should be realistic. We should think about global emissions as a whole. We shouldn't be so myopically focused on our domestic emissions. And we need to prioritise living standards for British people.
To achieve the 81% cut in carbon emissions without detrimentally affecting people's living conditions?
Well, at the moment, he hasn't set out any detail, and that's what I think is so wrong. And, you know, we made these mistakes in the past, so we know why they don't work. Because ultimately, what he wants to do is grandstand on the world stage without telling the British people what that target will cost them. And if it ultimately means that people are poorer here, or they have to make very difficult choices in this country, where only 1% of global emissions and emissions elsewhere are rising, then what you'll end up with is a very unhappy public, and actually a rest of the world looking on thinking, well, we don't really want to do that, thank you very much. I mean, Keir's whole argument is that we need to be a world leader so other people follow our lead. So that's why it's so important to look at the detail and what that means, because if you're making it look very bad for your country, you're losing jobs, you know, energy bills are going up, people are poorer, then why would anyone else want to do it? So this is why it's really important that we're really rational, that we're really honest, we're transparent about the trade-offs. It was the argument that I was brought in last year to make, and this is why we will be continuing to hold them to account. For example, pledges like the £300 off energy bills, which they promised in the election, which has now disappeared, and all the other costs that we think might come down the line.
Conservative peer Zach Goldsmith and former Environment Minister under Boris Johnson disagrees with you. He says he can't exaggerate how great it is to have senior government figures from Britain dragging the focus away from the technocratic one-dimensional focus on carbon counting towards championing the actual natural world. It's wonderful to see. So good to have the UK back and leading on this, the most important cause of all. That's a bit of a dig, isn't it? Rishi Sunak and your previous administration.
Well, look, there are going to be many debates about this. I think it's one of the most important things that the country faces is how we go about this energy transition and what we're doing. I'm actually, by the way, a very big proponent of nature and nature-based solutions. So one of the things I did when I was in post was support the Amazon Fund, which is protecting one of the world's most important forests. But that is not the same thing as telling people here to change their consumption, for example, accelerating diet shifts away from meat and dairy. That's not the same thing as making your energy really expensive. And my argument that I would say to Zach and anybody else who wants to debate me on this is that I think that is counterproductive. If you are moving industry from this country because energy's got too expensive to China, which is 60% powered by coal, you are increasing global carbon emissions. If you're shutting down the North Sea here and you're importing more LNG from abroad, that is increasing global carbon emissions. And that's why I think it's really important. Like I said, we're honest about what the plans are. We can look at the trade-offs, and we're making sure we're putting living standards for British people first.
Just focusing on health matters, we've spoken to the Health Secretary this morning, Wes Streeting. He's been heavily trailing his reforms to the National Health Service, and we've heard a bit more of the detail of what they're going to look like today. He wants to name and shame poor-performing hospitals, and he wants to cut back on the use of locums and bank nurses. These are good proposals, aren't they?
Well, they, were good when we announced them back in spring as well. So, look, I think it's right that there's accountability in the public sector, just like there is in the private sector. This is something that the former Health Secretary, Victoria Atkins, was bringing in back in spring, and I welcome any reforms that would improve patient services from the NHS. The only point that I would make is the argument that we've been saying is they've given a huge amount of money to the NHS without productivity reforms that we had sat on the shelf ready to go, stuff like this. And I think it's a funny way of negotiating to give out the money first without signing anybody up for any of these reforms. So I hope he'll be able to get some of this stuff over the line. Like I said, we came up with very detailed productivity plans, workforce plans that we did in collaboration with the NHS, which was supported by them, which everyone had bought into, that Labour seemed to have ditched coming into office, just favouring kind of spraying the cash. And so, look, I hope they get reforms over the line. I think ultimately the thing that we all want to see is improved services for patients.
OK, Claire Coutinho, Shadow Secretary of State for Climate Change and Net Zero, thanks very much.
The Archbishop of Canterbury has announced his resignation following a damning report into a prolific child abuser associated with the Church of England.
The review found that Justin Welby could and should have reported John Smythe's abuse of boys and young men in 2013.
Victims have now called on further clergymen to resign as the Church looks to appoint a new Archbishop.
Well, let's speak now to Catholic media commentator Caroline Farrow. Good morning to you, Caroline.
Are there any lessons, Caroline, you think that the Church of England could learn from the Roman Catholic Church on this?
Absolutely, yes. I mean, I think what's surprising is, that they didn't have safeguarding in place, or if they did, they certainly didn't follow it. So, Justin Welby, when he took over as Archbishop of Canterbury in 2013, that should have been the first thing that he did. He had the power, he had the clout. He should have said, right, what has John Smythe been doing? Let's have a thorough investigation. Let's go straight to the police. Let's do absolutely everything we can. Now, those procedures are still, as far as I'm aware, these sorts of procedures are there in the Catholic Church. In the 2001, we had the Nolan inquiry, which set a gold standard for safeguarding. So I'm sure that the same procedures exist within the Church of England. So the question is, why didn't Welby follow them?
And, what do you think will happen to the Church of England if you think about what the impact of abuse allegations have had on the Catholic Church? Is there a way back? Can people trust the Church of England? Or do you think this will have done, irreversible harm to the Church?
I hope that it hasn't done irreversible harm. It's very easy to sit here as a Catholic, and there is no schadenfreude for me in what's happened. Christians in the Church of England and the Anglican Communion are my brothers and sisters in Christ, and what's happened to them affects all of us. So, and of course, every single Christian is tarred by the same brush, because, as you mentioned, we had the same scandal in the Catholic Church. I think there should be a way back, but they need to get firm, strong and decisive leadership on this, and they need to really take this issue in hand, and there needs to be a clearing of the Aegean stable, so to speak. I think what's disturbing, apart from the obvious about Justin Welby not initially doing what he should have done and then not resigning, is that when you read his resignation statement yesterday, it was very clear that he was being forced to go rather than going from his own volition. He didn't want to fall on his sword. He was pushed rather than go voluntarily. And there was a real air of resentment. It has become clear to me that I must take personal responsibility. Well, actually, of course you should, even if he had been completely blameless, which we know that he wasn't. But even if he had been completely blameless, the Church needs to show that it's institutionally pure, that it's doing the right thing, it's on top of this, and this is how seriously it takes abuse, and this is how seriously it takes the victims. I mean, bear in mind that many of John Smythe's victims have died. They're not going to see justice. John Smythe himself died, and it was known from 1984 onwards that John Smythe was engaged in some horrific activity, that the aura around him was one of being very unsavory. So why, if something had been done much, much earlier, then countless more victims could have been saved. And it seems to me that the attitude was out of sight, out of mind. He's in South Africa. Oh, well, they can deal with it. Whereas actually they should have said, hang on, there is something really, really unpleasant about this guy. He's got a deep-seated disorder. He's going around sadistically beating and brutalizing boys in a very sexual fashion. What can we do to make sure that he's out of circulation and not able to hurt anyone else?
Why, Caroline? It's obvious that the Archbishop doesn't see that as his fault or his responsibility. Why is he not making the connect?
I wonder possibly if it's because John Smythe wasn't a clergyman. John Smythe was a barrister. I mean, he was deeply involved in the Church of England, and also some elements of the Church of England don't believe in holy orders in the same way that we have in the Catholic Church. You can have a vocation to lead without being a priest. So it might be that Justin Welby thought, well, he's not my direct report. He's not a sort of employee of the Catholic of the Church of England, so to speak. It doesn't concern. The procedure doesn't concern him, which shows that he was maybe acting in this, in the spirit. To the letter of the rules, but not necessarily the spirit. But that said, he was giving donations to this guy. This guy was deeply involved in the Church of England, was running camps that were designed to sort of groom, and I don't mean in the sexual. Well, of course, in both meanings of the word, but these camps were grooming boys for future leadership within the Church of England. He had a very influential role. So either Justin Welby thought, well, you know, this is not my problem because he's not a clergyman, or maybe Justin Welby felt uncomfortable because, let's face it, Justin Welby is from a rich and privileged Eton background, which is where John Smythe was operating. He was running these camps for boys that were predominantly from Eton, Harrow, Winchester. So, you know, these top public schools, maybe he was part of that circle. And maybe it's the same problem I think we saw in the Catholic Church is, you know, wanting to protect the institution and having a bit of compassion and, you know, for everybody, and thinking, well, you know, maybe he won't do it again. Who knows why he didn't act, but clearly he didn't. And I think we all have to really, this is not something that, again, the Catholic Church can sit back and go, ha, 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 it doesn't happen here. It can't happen here again. It can. And we all have to extend an olive branch of sympathy and concern to the Church of England, to the victims, but not sit on our laurels complacently and say, OK, this is a lesson for us. As soon as we become aware that there's some sort of abuse, we must report it. We must take the perpetrator out of action. And we must do all that we can to stop this sort of thing happening again.
Thank you very much for your forthright views there, Caroline Farrow. We appreciate it. We've got to leave it there. Thank you very much.
We should just say, in a statement, the former Archbishop of Canterbury, Justin Welby, said, "It's very clear that I must take personal and institutional responsibility for the long and re-traumatising period between 2013 and 2024.
I hope this decision makes clear how seriously the Church of England understands the need for change and our profound commitment to creating a safer church. As I step down, I do so in sorrow with all victims and survivors of abuse."
OK, let's talk about the NHS, shall we? The Health Secretary was on our programme this morning. He is set to name and shame those poor-performing hospitals in a bid to tackle the ongoing crisis in the health sector.
But critics have warned the introduction of league tables will fail to address the root cause of the problems, many fearing vulnerable patients could suffer as a result.
Well, let's have a listen to what Wes Streeting told us a little bit earlier on Breakfast.
Rewarding the highest performers by letting go of the top-down centralisation and control, which is excessive in the NHS, supporting those leaders who are in challenging areas where performance is nowhere near as good as we would like it to be, and where their performance falls short of the leaders of the pack, and where we've got consistent underperformance, to make sure that we're taking action and we're not just allowing people to coast along, drifting and failing, but we move them on to do something else.
Well, so can reforms like that fix what's deemed to be a broken health service? Well, let's go to our reporter on the scene, Adam Cherry, and he'll tell us more. Adam, good morning.
Morning, guys. Yeah, it's an interesting one, isn't it? We already had the carrot side of things. Now we're getting the stick. So 22.5 billion a year in the budget to the NHS. Everyone said, well, that's fine, but this is something of a money pit, isn't it? We throw cash at the NHS every year and nothing really seems to change. So this is the other part of the equation. This is get your act together. Those we saw from the Health Secretary, those who perform well will be rewarded with extra money for equipment and more control over their trusts. And those who are underperforming will have the improvement squad sent in, or ultimately they will be sacked. Now, the way they're measuring this, there are several several criteria. Basically, it's time until you're seen in A&E, so waiting times, surgery, how effective that is. They're going to judge the leadership as well. It's unclear exactly how they'll do that, but maybe looking at finances and things like that. So it's a bold step, and already you're seeing some pushback from unions and doctors who are saying this is going to affect morale and might not necessarily improve those waiting times or efficiency. But I think the government's position is we can't just keep throwing money at this, as I just said, and we have to try something new. And this is a bold step. It's sort of like a university league table. So customers, or in this case patients, can see what they're going into when they walk into hospital. Are they going to be treated well? And are the staff up to scratch, essentially?
When we're talking about the introduction of league tables, essentially it's the reintroduction, isn't it? Alan Milburn, as Health Secretary, brought those in under Blair. They scrapped them after 5 years. It was seen as sometimes drawing resources away from the areas that actually needed them, or areas that were actually doing well suddenly started to fail because all the resources taken to the areas that were failing. Lots of unforeseen consequences, I suppose, is what I'm trying to say, of league tables. The proof will be in the pudding. Will it work? Because one thing's for sure, everybody can agree, the NHS does need some reform.
Well, Isabel, yeah, that's exactly right. We'll see. The proof will be in the pudding. But as I said, that we have been throwing cash at the NHS, taxpayers' money, for years, and it was part of the previous government's mission, one of those 5 missions, those 5 priorities from Rishi Sunak to cut waiting times, and they failed. Now, as I said, money is one thing, but reform is another. You heard Claire Coutinho, the Shadow Energy Secretary, say they had productivity plans and Labour don't. Well, that's an argument, but again, this is part of the package. Maybe we'll hear more in due course, but something had to be done, and this is part of that solution, I would say.
We've got you speaking about Claire Coutinho. She was, I guess you could say, not impressed by the announcements from the Prime Minister at COP29, and she actually went so far as to say she thinks emissions are going to go up under some of their policies, and she wants to see some of the detail. Tell us more about what you thought she had to say.
Yeah, it's interesting. So the mission we heard yesterday from the Prime Minister is cutting emissions by 81% by 2035. And the question there is, well, how do you do that without rationing energy and making people go cold during the winter, or making driving your car so much more expensive with new taxes and so on? And you know, Claire Coutinho's criticism there is that the detail is very light, and she needs to see more of those plans. Perhaps we'll see that in due course, but I thought that it wasn't the most convincing pitch yesterday. Starmer saying, the Prime Minister saying, we will achieve this without encroaching on your life. It can be done. You should not feel any negative impact from this. But given the size of this claim, as I said, 81% in about 10 years, where's that going to come from? You can't just expect it through efficiencies and renewables alone. I mean, it will be very difficult to make that target without making some concessions. But that is the promise. And again, proof will be in the pudding.
Thank you, Adam. Thank you very much indeed. Poll of the day. Let's have a look at that. Is Keir Starmer right to commit the UK to cutting greenhouse gases by 81%?
We'll have those results for you in Martin Daubney's show this afternoon. Plus, we'll have our own little tally of your thoughts this morning just after 9 o'clock. If you haven't voted, you just need to go to gbnews.com/poll.
Right now, here's your weather picture.
A nice bright morning will generate a lovely warm day, right through to the evening. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Morning, welcome along to your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. Again, it's a bit chilly out there this morning. Some fog patches around as well. Most of us having a dry day, and for some, there'll be some pleasant autumn sunshine. But first off, we do have to get rid of the fog. And for Western Scotland and Northern Ireland, not a lot of sunshine on offer here. Thicker cloud and at times some drizzly rain. We've lost the showers from the far southeast, still a small chance of one this morning, but generally it's going to be dry across England and Wales. Some patches of cloud and some stubborn fog patches, but much of southern England, eastern England and parts of eastern Scotland seeing some lengthy spells of sunshine, lifting the temperatures to 11, 12 degrees Celsius, so about average for the time of year. Feeling colder, though, where it does stay fairly gloomy. And it's going to be quite a grey day in western Scotland. Rain and drizzle on and off along the coast here. Probably staying dry, though, through the central belt and across the northeast. Decent chance of some sunny spells. Quite a drab day for Northern Ireland. Lots of cloud here. Misty and murky conditions persisting for most of the day. Staying quite grey for northwest England and North Wales. And some stubborn zones of cloud across the Midlands. But elsewhere, I say, many places, South Wales, southern England, eastern England, seeing a fair bit of sunshine. The cloud will continue to drift southwards as we go through the night. That will help to keep the temperatures up, so it won't be as cold tonight as recent nights. Some holds here and there across Scotland could allow those temperatures to dip down close to freezing, but generally speaking, holding up in the mid-single figures for most of us into Thursday. And not as much fog around either first thing on Thursday, but much more in the way of cloud. A duller day, certainly across eastern England and southern England. Again, though, most places dry, but a drizzle here and there over the hills, and we'll see some rain and drizzle at times for northern parts of Northern Ireland, western Scotland, and some showery rain for a time across the Northern Isles. Temperatures, again, mostly getting up to double figures, 10, 11 or 12 Celsius. Signs of things turning colder, though, through this weekend.
we'll see a cold snap, which will quickly develop into a warm front. Boxed Boiler Repairs, sponsors of weather on GB News.
How would you like to win your celebrations on us this year? We're offering you £25,025 plus shopping vouchers and a GB News goodie bag.
And here's how you could win. Up next on the programme, we're going to be joined by the winner of what is called the James Dyson Award, and she aims to help those undergoing chemotherapy. OK, have us tune in on that next.
Sunday with Michael Portillo from 11, only on GB News.
On the 8th of October at Battersea Arts Centre, a new orchestra launched its inaugural season. The orchestra, which is named Chromatica, is formed of some of the best young musicians in Britain. They're due to perform in traditional venues and in community spaces. The aim is to bring their youth and dynamism to a wide repertoire of music. Predominantly, they'll work with emerging conductors who will have the chance to shape the orchestra and its repertoire. To share her experiences of bringing the ensemble together, I'm joined by the violinist and Chromatica orchestra lead, Maren Bosma. To what extent is this novel? To what extent is this new ground?
Well, new ground, it is new ground in a sense that this is a completely new orchestra. Obviously, in the current sort of cultural climate, it's not really easy to set up a new orchestra. And so in that sense, it's a novelty for us to kind of try and carve out our space in the current climate of musical orchestras and musicians in Britain.
Yes, I mean, it's quite odd in a way to think of a new orchestra because the ones that we have tend to be struggling and numbers indeed have been reduced. I used to be associated with an orchestra which unfortunately went under. You've got some private backing for this.
Yeah.
Why do you think the private backers have been willing to give you support? What is it that they see as your unique selling proposition?
Well, Chromatica Orchestra essentially is an early career orchestra. So we're formed of all sort of top musicians who've graduated in, say, the last sort of 5 to 10 years. Because everyone is of that generation, there is a sort of enthusiasm and dynamism that we bring to the stage I think is quite unique. The orchestra's mission, it's really focused on creating opportunities for young emerging musicians.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more.
Whether it's breaking royal news, Will, please bring us up to date, or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Why go out on a Friday night when Friday night comes straight to your home?
Talking about?
Join me and my A-team of top pundits. Chemistry tonight is electric. As we tackle the big stories of the day with wit, insight and fearless energy.
Man of the people.
It's all vibe.
Just a filing cabinet on wheels with a tie on.
So, order in Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, every Friday at 8, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Right, our next guest on the programme is the international winner of the James Dyson Award 2024.
She's Olivia Humphreys. Her invention, Athena, is a portable chemotherapy scalp cooling device. And the whole idea is to make chemo more accessible for those undergoing it.
Yes, so let's speak then, shall we, to Olivia Humphreys this morning. Congratulations.
Well done, Olivia.
Yeah, well done. Tell us a little bit about the inspiration behind this idea, because we've heard of these cooling caps being an absolute game changer for people going through chemotherapy, but your idea makes it portable, makes it easier for people going through what's a very difficult time in their life.
Yeah, so the inspiration for the project came from my mum. My mum was diagnosed with breast cancer in 2019, and she was incredibly worried about losing her hair, and she verbalised it to her care staff in UHL, where I'm from, in Limerick, and she was able to avail of scalp cooling treatment, which was something that she received alongside her chemotherapy infusions. And I spent quite a lot of time with her during her infusion appointments, spending time in the hospital, seeing how everything worked. And this year I was in my final year of product design and technology, and they wanted they wanted us to solve a need that people had. So I could have done anything, but it just happened to be that Mum was right there. We had the previous experience, and it was such a prominent need that addresses people not just mentally, and not just physically, but mentally. So
Olivia,
that was it. That was the inspiration.
You talk about cooling the head. Why is that necessary? What does it actually do?
Yeah, so chemotherapy is a drug that cycles around the body, and it attacks fast-dividing cells. Fast-dividing cells are cancerous cells, but we also have good fast-dividing cells in our bodies, may it be our fingernails, our hair follicles, our eyelashes, our eyebrows. And when chemotherapy drug is going around the body, it doesn't know whether to attack the good or the bad. So it's all about minimizing blood flow to a certain area to minimize the damage you can have in that area. So, for example, with scalp cooling is minimizing the blood flow to the scalp for the time period that you're having an infusion to minimize how much of an effect that the drug has on that area.
And what about, what sort of effect does it have on the whole medical theatre? Like, for instance, who will take this up? How will it be used?
Yeah, so from previous experience watching how it was dealt with Mum, it was a treatment that in an already busy clinic, nurses had to give extra time to patients that wanted to avail of this treatment. So for Mum, she was the only person in a room full of 30 that got it. And so it meant that the nurses she had to come in earlier and she had to leave later. And the nurses had to check up on her a lot more frequently. And everyone in the ward kind of looked at Mum and wondered what she was doing and all these kind of things. So it was just trying to remove all of those kind of aspects from the treatment and make it so that you're like any other patient and that you can seamlessly integrate in and out without any additional time or care from the care staff.
And so I suppose that means your mum was able to sort of test out the prototype, if you like, and you know, I don't want to use the phrase the stars aligned because obviously getting cancer is not a good thing, but I suppose it was. If this has enabled you to come up with something that will benefit so many other people. I mean, what was your mum's feedback about your idea?
It was amazing. Like the feedback I got from Mum, the feedback I got from the hospital where my mum received treatment, all of the people that have also received the same treatment is what shaped the project into what it is today. Good feedback, good input has created a good project, and yeah, she's delighted. It's an incredibly fulfilling project to work on.
Wow, incredible.
It was
how is she? How is she at the moment?
She's great. Yeah, she's got hair twice the length of mine, 5 years in remission.
Brilliant,
She's
brilliant,
yeah.
brilliant. Well, look, listen, it's marvellous. It's marvellous that Dyson sponsors this, and that, you know, there are people like you just making a difference to everyone's lives. Congratulations from us to you, and thanks for talking to us this morning.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, the
Thank
prize
you.
that she's won is £30,000, and I have to say, absolutely well deserved there. Fantastic. Did you see her face light up when she was just describing how her mum was doing?
When you hear
fabulous.
about things and well, people win prizes for whatever, and then you have something that is just so pertinent, so useful, so life-changing.
And it's
literally.
a good news story. How much we love good news stories. Absolutely fantastic. Well, we wish all the very best to Olivia and her mum and anybody who's lucky enough to use her design.
Now, up next on the programme, we're going to be talking to football pundit and former player Mark Lawrenson about who should present Match of the Day. That's next.
The latest GB News travel.
Good morning, I'm Russell Holding. Train services between Selby and Doncaster are diverting via Goole again today because of an ongoing points problem with buses replacing trains between Doncaster and Howden. Train services are suspended between Sleaford and Boston because of an incident. In Staffordshire, the A460 is closed in both directions between Hensford and Rugeley after an accident and fuel spill causing delays. There are delays and some cancelled trains between Leicester and Loughborough after a signalling problem. In Buckinghamshire, roadworks on the A5 south of Milton Keynes are causing queues in both directions. In Essex on the A12, the northbound exit at junction 19 near Chelmsford's closed where a lorry's overturned. On the M25 in Essex along anti-clockwise delays heading away from junction 30 for the A13 towards 29 for the A127 after an accident. And in London, Regent Street's closed southbound and Cockspur Street's closed for emergency repairs.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Paul Coyte's with me now, and we're going to talk to Mark Lawrenson, former Liverpool defender and Match of the Day host.
Match of the Day, I mean, Mark was on it for goodness knows how many years, and Mark's done... Morning, Mark.
Morning, Paul.
Good seeing you.
Great to see you. What do you make... How many years we... Go on.
One second. I was just watching and listening to that the girl on before about the cat, you know, for the cancer.
Yeah.
And that was it. Was it Dyson, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Dyson, didn't he threaten to move all his stuff to Singapore?
Yes.
Did you hear what he said?
No.
You wouldn't see me for dust.
Oh. Well, he sponsored it anyway.
Mark, I get it. It's very poor, but I'm
who are you going to see? Right, who, since you're being controversial, who are you going to see for Dust presenting Match of the Day? We've got a situation today. They're saying Mark Chapman won't share it, and he certainly won't share it with Kelly Summers. What's your take on the runners and riders?
Right. Well, the first thing, I think there's a new head of sport at the BBC.
There is. Alex K. Jelski, yes.
Anything could and probably will happen. Chappers has earned the right to choose. You know, he's done the hard yards. He's done the Sundays, obviously, for a long time now. And he's a very, very good operator, not just on the TV, but also on the radio as well. So it's up to him, basically. So
it's not up to him. It's up to the boss man.
Well, it is, but it's, you know, Eamonn, you know what it's like. It's like the boss man trying to make a decision, and it's the BBC. They never quite get it right, do they?
Mm. Well, yeah. Well, we thought that. Well, we thought that when you left, but with Match of the Day, I mean, halcyon years. Who did you like working? Because you worked with all of them. I mean, you worked with Des, you've worked with Gary, even worked with Jimmy Hill back in the day as well.
Mm. Jimmy, a bit of Bob Wilson, yeah. I mean, obviously. Des left very quickly, didn't he? He went to the ITV, couldn't money and quite right. And Gary was thrown in, and he'll tell you himself that he struggled for a while, but obviously now a consummate presenter. So I think all of it was just good fun, wasn't it? You had to Saturday night. You sat there with Hanson and Trevor Brooking, and you just had to kind of pinch yourself, thinking, there were you preaching to the nation, whether they love you or they didn't love you, it didn't make any difference.
But my point now is, Mark, I think if they're wise, they will use this as an opportunity not only to change presenter, but to change the format. In other words, look at Sky and what Sky are doing. More analysis happening there, more punditry, perhaps.
But the only thing with that, Eamonn, is they've only got so much time, haven't they?
Yeah.
the problem with the BBC. You've got, you know, it's whatever it is. It's 45 minutes match of the day too.
Yeah.
And they're what they do is they try and get as much of the action as possible into those moments. So you can't change it. You cannot change it. It's work. Why would you want to change it? You just leave it as it is. But it's obviously now the thing about it is who's going to front it. So,
but you're one of these people, don't you? Think there's kind of too much analysis. You know, there's so many stats. There's so many. Everybody seems to be an expert now. It's a little too much, don't you think?
Yeah. The man in the street's not bothered, is he? To be honest, he wants to see the goals.
I want to see the goals, but I want to hear a bit of debate about how the build-up happened or what they're doing wrongly. I mean, this obsession with playing out from the back, and you think, who the heck is this benefiting? I don't believe in playing out from the back. You know, are you a believer in playing out from the back?
Not greatly, no. But you should be able to. You should be able to do both, shouldn't you? But it's. I think with all the analysis, it's for the man in the street. It's great because they would just be watching previously, and he's up there and he scored a goal, and this is him, and one thing and another. But the stats thing just drives me nuts.
Yeah. I mean, I got to say there is nothing like watching a game of football with someone that truly knows, like yourself, that will then pick out, look, this is what's going on here. This is what's going on here. So it really is. It's important that happens. But when you played, did you always watch it? So, you probably won more than you lost when you're playing for Liverpool, but would you always watch it that night after you played and see how you did?
Cool. Well, that Liverpool team would be all out on the lash. Listen, one day early in my career at Liverpool, right, very briefly, and on the Monday after we'd played, I had to walk onto the training pitch, and Bob Paisley, the manager, said to me, Did you watch Match of the Day on Saturday? And I'm thinking straight away, is he asking me that because he thinks I've been out on the lash?
Yes.
Right? But it just so happens I did. For one reason, I must have been ill. I stayed in and watched it. And we'd played Arsenal at the weekend, and we beat them 2-0, I think, away at Highbury. And I'd come out with the ball on a couple of occasions from the back. And Jimmy Hill had picked it out and said, look, Hansen and Lawrence, and this is the way they play, all that kind of stuff. So he said to me, did you watch Match of the Day? And I said, yeah. He went, just remember, everybody else did. And that was just a way of saying to me that if I had a little trick going forward, that now everybody knew about it because it was on Match of the Day. I mean, he was a clever boy.
Yeah. And what's it like then as a player and a pundit, as a player, hearing yourself mentioned, seeing yourself in action, and then does that affect you as a pundit? Do you think I better not be too direct on this, or
you know what it's like? Yeah.
It's got to be the way you've got to be, haven't you? So when I used to watch myself, I'd have a cushion over my head. Thought, Christ, is that really me? God. Well, and then when you actually see yourself on the telly, you spot one or two things, you think, goodness me, I'm not as good as I thought I was.
Yeah.
Listen, I can tell you, you were as good as we thought you would.
You were.
Finally, Match of the Day. So the future is safe, no matter who takes care of it. Do you think it's all about the football?
Yeah, absolutely. And by the way, they've got the highlights for the Champions League as well, so they're in a really good position. But they've not got to muck this up now. Who they're going to appoint? Definitely.
But is there somebody that you just suspect it will go to? For instance, I think that they'll be heavily influenced to appoint a woman.
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right. It'll be a woman and a man. So that's the way of the world, isn't it?
It's the way of the world.
Kelly Summers is good. And obviously she's in the building as it was. So it remains to be seen. But well done, chap, as well. He lost his wife and all those kind of things. And he's done brilliant. He's done absolutely brilliant. And he deserves it.
Yeah. Well, OK, very interesting, Mark. Good to hear from you. And I was just thinking, the last time I met you in the flesh, saw you in the flesh, was at Old Trafford, and you were there for Match of the Day. And so that was a few years ago. But
did you win, by the way?
Can't remember what the game was.
Yeah.
So what you're saying, Eamonn, is you were there enjoying hospitality.
That's exactly what happened. Watching none of the game, having a lovely time, swanning around, didn't matter what the score was.
What
game was that? No idea.
It's like remember. You watching Match of the Day, Mark, is exactly what it was like, both of you. I'm very, very disappointed.
Thanks, Mark.
Good to see you.
Thank you. Bye-bye. There we go. I'll have you know, I was there as I sit on the board of the Man United Foundation.
Yes.
I was there in an official.
Well, of course you were. Yeah.
I have my season tickets across.
Yes.
With all the ordinary people as well.
Were you there in the season ticket?
No,
or were you?
it was
you
in
weren't.
the posh,
Okay,
was in the posh bit that day.
I don't believe you.
Very good. Right, the newspapers, talking about those next.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Headliners. Tomorrow's papers tonight, every night from 11 p.m.
This is about pulchronomics, which is the often hidden, often controversial economics of beauty. And there's this guy, he's called, here it says Anil Hamamesh, but I think they've missed out the D, so I'm guessing he's Daniel rather than Anil, which he might be, though. He might be or he might be Anil for an Anil Hamamesh, maybe. That's his unfortunate name. But basically, he's looked into how ugliness affects people, and it turns out he's discovered that ugly people are less attractive. And that affects them for the rest of their life. Now, where this does get interesting, it is worrying because, of course, this is going to lead to the ugly rights movement, ugly pride march down some dirty back street. And but I remember hearing about this at the time. People born in the UK between March 3rd and March 9th, 1958, were part of this massive survey that was done, which was finding about what would happen to them later in life, and it went through a number of different factors. But I didn't know this. The teachers were also asked to rate their pupils on attractiveness.
Yeah, it's a bit pedo-y.
But yeah, I mean, I don't know whether that would wash now, but it was bone structure and where they're symmetrical, that kind of thing.
You should probably really have a committee of at least half a dozen teachers. Take a sort of standardised view across that. You might get a different point of view from the biology teacher, from the Latin master.
You suggest this to a school, and then we can see if we get it going.
It's interesting, though. I don't know whether you're aware of this, but generally speaking, it is understood within sort of psychological, psychometrics and so on, that IQ is the thing that most closely maps your outcomes, generally speaking. But the idea of beauty is the one that isn't discussed. And there is genuinely a theory that this is actually the great determinant of your life chances.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the arguments. We get rid of the disrespect, and then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
We are going through the papers in the company one last time this morning of Paula London and Oscar Reddrop. And Paula, we start with you, and this is bad news for any homeowners. We're going to see those mortgage rates going up. What's all this about? This is Inside the Mail, page 2.
Yeah, it's very worrying. A lot of homeowners thought it would be going down because the inflation has gone down. So the Bank of England's rate has gone from 5.25 to 5, but the banks don't need to pass this on. So yeah, it's quite scary, and I think unemployment's going to go up as well. So at the moment, hold on, this one. Yeah.
Well, the Mail are also saying that there are concerns about President-elect Donald Trump's 20% trade tariffs and what that could mean as well in terms of mortgages. I mean, it's not a good time, basically, if you've got a big or even a small mortgage.
It's not a good time. As a renter who dreams of one day owning his own home, potentially, I actually see the burden that homeowners have, and it's almost like a different form of renting pressure. Now, the hostage to fortune you are with a mortgage, and actually, in some ways, it doesn't feel that appealing, which I think is a huge cultural shift, actually, maybe for my generation, who live in a city, per se.
Yeah.
And then you've got things like, youth unemployment figures, kind of going absolutely kind of skyrocketing.
Yeah, well, that is the story that you've chosen inside the Times, page 9, and this is about young people who are not even trying to find work. And we talk about the economically inactive, and quite often that's in relation to these people sort of over 50 who enjoyed lockdown, haven't wanted to get back into the workforce. But now it's the young, we're being told.
Yeah, and the same applies, you know, so I think there's 1.2 million people between 16 to 24-year-olds who are not doing anything to find, you know, employment or even further education, and that is a post-pandemic hangover, and that is so sad, because mental health is often referenced as a reason as to why, but, you know, ironically, you know, working, purpose, structure, day to day, you know, ambition, even if you're at the very bottom of the, you know, rung of the ladder, that is all encompassing, and that can completely transform your mental health. I feel like the Labour Party won't identify this as the problem it is. I think they'll be soft on it. I think they won't want to talk about it. They won't want to say the tough things that actually is needed to get people who do have mental health problems into work at a younger age. It's a combination, you know, be kind, yes, give them support, yes, but you've got to be, at some point, you have to be tough.
Yeah. And what are they doing, all these people?
I think they're on social media. A lot of people are very addicted to social media. It's addictive, and I think a lot of people now want fast, quick money. They want to be influencers, they want to be reality stars, whereas years ago you used to working your way up the ladder. Now they just want big money straight away, and they've become quite lazy as well.
I think you should be an electrician. So expensive, and they're never going to be replaced by AI.
And plumbers, and builders.
You know, I'm being deadly serious. It's actually a slight regret of mine that I didn't get into that kind of line of work. I've got friends who, you know, learnt a trade and are making crazy money.
You get to pick and choose the work that you want to do.
Yeah, and they're building it out. It's like they employ a helper, then
It's so hard to find good people that are trusted, that once they are, you know, the word of mouth is out there, they are so in demand.
They always work.
They will always work,
Right, so all of this assisted dying bill, assisted suicide, hundreds could die each year.
Can I just say, this is just a ridiculous headline from the Mail on assisted suicide. I think it's a really important debate, but the idea hundreds could die each year under these proposals. The people who would be eligible for this have to be a terminal patient with 6 months left to live.
I know,
so
but God gets things wrong.
This bill will be dead within a year's period.
I don't believe that, because often a doctor will say you have 6 months to live, and some people are still living 5 years later.
I mean, I don't know what percentage, but if you're given a terminal diagnosis, you've got less than 6 months to live.
But you haven't got 6 months. You could have 2 years or 3 years or 4 years. So many times people are given that long to live, and they're still living.
Well, what they won't be is in pain, and they won't have to deal with all the angst and anguish that goes along with worrying about all that sort of thing. I'm very relaxed about this. I don't really get hot under the collar about this, but the Daily Mail does.
Yeah, we've spoken about this before. You were kind of for it. I just think only God should take a life, and I just feel some people are going to be under pressure with their families, and apparently if you've got mental health problems, you're not going to be able to make the decision. But how do you know if someone has it or not if they haven't been diagnosed?
Well, you just got to assume everybody's got mental health problems these days.
Well, then you won't be able to have assisted dying.
And also this, you know, the whole issue of assisted dying for me came very much to life when I, as a reporter, went several times to the home of a guy called Tony Nicklinson. He has since died naturally, but he had locked-in syndrome. He could only communicate by blinking. It was torture for him. It was torture for his family. He would not have been able to have taken this, because you have to administer the drug yourself. It's one of the built-in guardrails, but it then precludes those people who probably would most want it from having access to it.
I don't think Parliament's ready for it.
I don't think Parliament's ready for it. I don't think they're going to vote for it.
No, I don't think they will either.
Sort of...
But I'm kind of like, you know, if with the right T's and C's, and you know, as the legislation laid out, it all, you know, and those safeguards are very much in there. It's not going to be some Wild West thing.
Surely the first thing anybody...
I don't know. I don't trust the Labour government. You know, they're already taking heating off older people as well, and you know, a lot of the youngsters don't seem to want the government to give a lot of money to the older people. It's like they want to kill them off. It feels sometimes.
I just think before you go down this road, let's sort out palliative care. You know, there was somebody within my extended family who was dying recently, couldn't get palliative care because it was the weekend. He had a painful, traumatic death, not just for him, but for everybody around him. Why is that happening in 2024 in Britain? We should have better palliative care. Then maybe people won't want this.
Well, I think it depends on what hospitals. That's why I think it's very good, the league table now. So if they're not performing in certain areas, other people will know. So need to pull their socks up.
Yes. Right, South Korea. This is your story in The Telegraph, Oscar. The president there is wooing Trump, and he's picked up on his golf clubs.
Yeah, so this is, in terms of Trump's kind of credentials and his strengths and weaknesses, this is an undeniable strength of Donald Trump. And my God, does he have his flaws? I think anyone, even supporters, would have to acknowledge that. But this is that kind of deal striking that he absolutely, if you could describe his style as president in a phrase, it's deal striking. And you will see really influential leaders like South Korea's president absolutely desperate to strike those deals as quickly as possible. They probably didn't pick up the phone or would have bothered to pick up the phone with Biden.
Well, what would be their in? I mean, here's, you know, you've got the president of South Korea practising his swing. What is your in with Biden? Like, I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. And it's really old school, and people might not want to hear this in a way, but, you know, particularly with the style that Trump brings to it, you know, some really important decisions, and this might strike fear in some people. I personally think it's not a bad thing. Some very serious and, you know, impressive deals are going to be struck on behalf of the American people on the golf course.
Yeah, it happens a lot, deals on golf courses.
It sounds silly, but that's the way
I don't know if Trump is going to be happy on golf courses again after his recent assassasination attempt. You know, he's barely been... He was barely on them. Has he? I was reading that he was...
his granddaughter.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you know, nobody should be afraid to do what they love, but I do wonder...
Keir Starmer, if it strikes me as someone who's not particularly good at golf, might be completely wrong.
I saw him try to box. That was so funny.
Get down a driving range, Keir.
What's Boris like at golf, out of interest?
I'm not sure. I don't think...
Does he call it golf, or does he have his own terminology for it, like whiff-whack?
Yeah, something like that. Might not have the patience for it, I reckon. Yeah.
A pub has been accused of taking diabolical liberties. This is O'Neill's in Wardour Street in London, and it is charging, what, for a pint after 10 o'clock?
They're charging £2 extra for a beer after 10 o'clock, so I really don't understand why they're doing it. And I also feel quite sorry for men, because men don't always get a good deal in life. It's not fair if the women don't have to pay more money after 10 o'clock. And I'd like to know why they're doing it.
Well, sorry, it's only for men?
Yes. Well, I'm being a bit bad there, because I'm presuming it's mainly men that drink pints of beer. I mean, some women do drink pints of beer.
Oh, right.
But it's not for wine, it's only for pints of beer. So I don't know why they're doing that, and do they not want people to drink pints? Do they want to make more money, maybe from spirits and cocktails?
Last orders.
I think they just assume everyone's drunk off.
Last orders for you two. Got to leave it there. Alex Deakin with the weather.
We'll see a cold snap, which will quickly develop into a warm front. Boxed Boiler Repairs, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Morning, welcome along to your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. Again, it's a bit chilly out there this morning. Some fog patches around as well. Most of us having a dry day, and for some, there'll be some pleasant autumn sunshine. But first off, we do have to get rid of the fog. And for Western Scotland and Northern Ireland, not a lot of sunshine on offer here. Thicker cloud and at times some drizzly rain. We've lost the showers from the far southeast, still a small chance of one this morning, but generally it's going to be dry across England and Wales. Some patches of cloud and some stubborn fog patches, but much of southern England, eastern England and parts of eastern Scotland seeing some lengthy spells of sunshine, lifting the temperatures to 11, 12 degrees Celsius, so about average for the time of year. Feeling colder, though, where it does stay fairly gloomy. And it's going to be quite a grey day in western Scotland. Rain and drizzle on and off along the coast here. Probably staying dry, though, through the central belt and across the northeast. Decent chance of some sunny spells. Quite a drab day for Northern Ireland. Lots of cloud here. Misty and murky conditions persisting for most of the day. Staying quite grey for northwest England and North Wales. And some stubborn zones of cloud across the Midlands. But elsewhere, I say, many places, South Wales, southern England, eastern England, seeing a fair bit of sunshine. The cloud will continue to drift southwards as we go through the night. That will help to keep the temperatures up, so it won't be as cold tonight as recent nights. Some holds here and there across Scotland could allow those temperatures to dip down close to freezing, but generally speaking, holding up in the mid-single figures for most of us into Thursday. And not as much fog around either first thing on Thursday, but much more in the way of cloud. A duller day, certainly across eastern England and southern England. Again, though, most places dry, but a drizzle here and there over the hills, and we'll see some rain and drizzle at times for northern parts of Northern Ireland, western Scotland, and some showery rain for a time across the Northern Isles. Temperatures, again, mostly getting up to double figures, 10, 11 or 12 Celsius. Signs of things turning colder, though, through this weekend.
There will be a light breeze in the morning, leading to a warm front. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good morning, I'm Russell Holding. Train services remain suspended between Sleaford and Boston because of an incident. In Staffordshire, the A460 is closed each way between Hensford and Rugeley after an accident and fuel spill. In Norfolk, the A47 is partly blocked westbound by an accident between Blowfield and Brundle, causing queues towards Norwich. In Buckinghamshire, the A5 is partly blocked for emergency repairs south of Milton Keynes, causing delays. In Essex, on the A12, the northbound exit at junction 19 for the Boreham interchange near Chelmsford is closed after a lorry overturned. In London, Regent Street's closed southbound towards Oxford Circus for emergency repairs, and Cockspur Street's closed each way off Trafalgar Square for repairs with long delays there. On the M25 in Surrey, there are clockwise queues from junction 9 at Leatherhead to 10 for the A3 after a breakdown. On the M4 in Wiltshire, there's a lane closed westbound after an accident between junctions 15 and 16 near Swindon, causing queues. And that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get the book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good morning. The Church of England in crisis.
The Archbishop of Canterbury resigns as more senior clergy are named in the child sex abuse scandal.
Justin Welby admits it's brought a profound sense of shame upon the Church.
So who is next in line to take over?
Can Labour's reforms fix the NHS? The Health Secretary set to name and shame poor-performing hospitals, but critics fear vulnerable patients will suffer. Wes Streeting joined us earlier.
We've got consistent underperformance to make sure that we're taking action and we're not just allowing people to coast along, drifting and failing, but we move them on to do something else.
Elon Musk has been appointed by Donald Trump as co-lead of a new efficiency department that he hopes will diagnose and dismantle bureaucracy in the White House.
Chilly out there again this morning, and once more some quite thick fog patches, but the dry November continues and some of us will see a bit of sunshine. To find out where, join me later for a full forecast.
1 minute past 9, a very good morning to you. I'm Eamonn Holmes.
I'm Isabel Webster and this is GB News Breakfast. I'm not sure if you're supposed to have favourite weather presenters, but I think Alex Deacon's my favourite. I don't know why. He's just got that cheery, kind of authoritative thing about him.
And the same old bad weather.
Exactly, even though the weather's rubbish. I love a bit of Alex Deacon. Cheers me up. I don't know why. Maybe it's his
Everybody's
colourful
cheering you up
shirt.
today. Gary Lineker in his undies is cheering you up. He's cheering you up.
Far be it from me to, be lecherous, but, he does look in good nick. And I think some of the headlines you were pointing out, a lot of the headlines talk about the fact that he has big ears. And I think that's the least interesting thing about his appearance, personally.
Well, I don't. People talk about sexism. I go on about this all the time. Well, they wouldn't say that about men. They wouldn't say that about women. You wouldn't have
big ears.
Talk about a woman's big ears as they do here. You see the headline there: big ears to big fears. And there was a headline yesterday, front of the Mirror. I think their lead was about his ears.
Whereas the Daily Mail had this picture of him. And I have to say, his ears, is this sexist of me? His ears were the last thing I was focusing on.
Yes.
I actually was speculating, sorry, we're going off on a tangent here, but he's very hair-free on his body.
Is he?
And I suspect he possibly has a wax, or I don't know. Anyway, that was the conversations we were having in the advert break about Gary Lineker. Should we turn our attention to more serious matters? Because the Archbishop of Canterbury yesterday made his announcement around lunchtime following that damning report into the Church of England's most prolific child sex abuser.
The review found that Justin Welby could and should have reported John Smythe's abuse of boys and young men in 2013.
Well, victims have called on further clergymen to resign as the Church looks to choose a new Archbishop of Canterbury.
We're joined now by Charlie Peters, our reporter, for the latest on this. Charlie, what have you got to tell us?
Well, good morning, Eamonn and Isabel. Well, yesterday, the Archbishop of Canterbury, Justin Welby, referred to the long-maintained conspiracy of silence that had covered up the heinous abuse of John Smythe, said to have abused at least 130 boys, both in Britain and also in South Africa and Zimbabwe, where he relocated under the cover of that conspiracy of silence. And in his resignation, Justin Welby said he took personal and institutional responsibility for those failures and the re-traumatising period between 2013 and 2024, where the Macon review that you just referred to found that many people knew about this abuse but insufficiently acted to refer it to the police, amounting to a cover-up. But with Welby standing down, there have now been calls for others to do the same, with some church leaders and indeed survivors starting calls for what they say should be the beginning of a clear out. They say that Welby's exit should just be the start, with 4 other bishops being named in a recent review, the Macon review, and it's the Bishop of Lincoln, Stephen Conway, who has said that he regretted a lack of action about his then diocese in 2013, but he said that that was really based on the office of Welby to do more. He's since issued a statement on the matter, saying, as part of my submission to the review, I confirm that during my tenure as the Bishop of Ely, I received a disclosure about John Smythe. It was my understanding that this matter was reported to the police in Cambridgeshire and duly passed on to the police in Hampshire, where the abuse had occurred. I acknowledge fully that my fault was not in rigorously pursuing Lambeth about that province-to-province communication. For this, I am deeply sorry. So, there may well be others who resign following Justin Welby's exit yesterday. Certainly the pressure is on them. But in central London this morning, I heard from some others who said that the buck stops at the top of the Church of England.
Well, I think the buck stops at the top, really, and I think as the leader of the Church of England and the Anglican Communion around the world, it's right that Archbishop Welby has decided to resign. I think it would be wrong for others to do so, otherwise it just becomes, a sacrificial game. Hopefully it will be a cleaning of the stables and the Church of England will be able to start again, but I think it's important the Church of England does take a view on moral issues and does tell people what is right and wrong, otherwise people drift.
Charlie, I'm interested to know about the...
Well, much of John Smythe's abuse occurred at Winchester College in Hampshire. He has since said, after a review, that it apologises unreservedly for the terrible experiences suffered by victims at the school. But we've also heard recently from Joanne Grenfell, the Church of England's safeguarding lead, who said that the Church needed to admit there is a problem relating to the abuse, the Church and its response.
Charlie, in the Archbishop's resignation letter yesterday, he said that he was informed in 2013 and told that police had been notified. Can you update us on where the police are with their investigation? Because it seems to me, if we're talking about the huge numbers of young men, 130 young men and boys, for over 2 decades, we should be hearing more from the police on all of this, shouldn't we?
Well, Isabel, Justin Welby took that information in 2013 as being accurate, and part of his apology and part of the reason why he's standing down is that he was simply told the police were notified but didn't follow it up, didn't check if that was the case. Now, it's understood that the police launched much of their investigation actually 4 years later in 2017, when the charitable trust that John Smythe worked at had a report that it had authored in 1982, finally made public in 2016. An investigative documentary released a year later then led to some police action, but John Smythe died the following year in South Africa. I have, however, reached out to Hampshire Police on this issue about what information they did have at 2013, and as soon as I have further, I'll ensure that we update our viewers.
OK, Charlie, thank you very much indeed. With the time coming up to 8 minutes past 9, the Health Secretary is set to name and shame poor-performing hospitals. This is a bid to tackle the ongoing NHS crisis.
Well, critics have warned that the introduction, or should we say reintroduction, of league tables will fail to address the root cause of the problems, with many fearing that actually vulnerable patients could suffer as a result.
Well, the Health Secretary, Wes Streeting, appeared on our show earlier this morning. This is what he had to say.
Rewarding the highest performers by letting go of the top-down centralisation and control, which is excessive in the NHS, supporting those leaders who are in challenging areas where performance is nowhere near as good as we would like it to be, and where their performance falls short of the leaders of the pack, and where we've got consistent underperformance, to make sure that we're taking action and we're not just allowing people to coast along, drifting and failing, but we move them on to do something else.
That's Wes Streeting. Let's get a quick update now from Adam Cherry. Will these reforms, Adam, be enough to fix what many people believe is a broken service?
I don't think there'll be enough alone, but they come as a package. So we had the first part of the equation in the budget, where the NHS was allocated billions a year, in real terms, a massive cash injection. And at the time, there was criticism that this wasn't accompanied by any targets for reform. They were just handed a blank cheque. Well, now, in fairness to the government and the Health Secretary, we get the other side of the equation. We get, you must improve to justify this cash and you'll be held accountable. I think that's the key phrase: accountability and transparency. It's like some have described it like a football league table or a university rankings. Everyone will know going into a hospital the standard of care and the abilities of the leadership of that trust. So it's a second part of an equation that might not necessarily solve everything overnight. They're certainly not going to argue that. Remember, in the last government, it was one of their 5 pledges to cut waiting lists, and they failed. This is not there's no quick fix to this. There's no magic wand, as the government will say, but it's part of the solution. And the bet is that in the long term, as with many of the government's reforms, the bet is in 5 years, can you turn around and say waiting lists are down, the cash has provided better equipment and better service, are the NHS leadership being held to account? If you can answer all those questions positively, then this will have been worthwhile and will have been worth the billions a year in the budget that we heard last month.
Adam, thank you very much indeed. So the poll today asking you, is Keir Starmer right in committing Britain to cutting greenhouse gases by 81% in just over 10 years?
And drum roll, please. 99% of you say no and 1% say yes. I have to say, every time we do these polls, they are in the upper 90 echelons, aren't they? That final result, though, will be in Martin Daubney's. It might change before then. I don't think it will. If you haven't cast your vote yet and you would like to, you just need to go to gbnews.com/poll. But that's pretty resounding, isn't it? 99% of our breakfast audience this morning think that Prime Minister is wrong to pledge to cut our emissions by 81% in just over 10 years.
Now, one of the biggest agricultural events in the Scottish calendar is taking place at the Royal Highland Centre today.
Yes, it aims to showcase cutting-edge farming technology.
Our GB News Scotland reporter Toby Maguire is in the middle of all that technology, and he's going to tell us more. Hiya, Toby.
Hi, good evening, Eamonn. Well, certainly we're here in Edinburgh, and this is AgriScot. This is the second biggest agriculture event here in Scotland on the calendar year. And while this is usually an event to showcase the latest technology and the latest techniques, which is to propel farming forward, of course there is only one story this year, and that is the news following Rachel Reeves' budget. And yesterday, of course, in GB News, we heard quite extensively the damage of the APR, the inheritance tax, and what that's going to do to families. But the devolved nations actually have a different problem to contend with, because in previous years, funding for farming and agriculture was usually a ring-fenced amount. But as of 2026, that's going to be included in the block grant of devolved nations, meaning farmers and those in the agriculture sector are going to have to fight tooth and nail to get their fair share of that money. Now, today in Edinburgh, we're going to actually hear from John Swinney, who's Earlier this week, he's just called that Rachel Reeves' budget an unacceptable amount of concern, worry and future uncertainty for Scotland's rural communities. Now, Scotland's Agriculture Minister Jim Fairley, he was supposed to be the headline act today, but indeed the outcry is so loud here in Scotland that First Minister John Swinney has had to step in. So an interesting day ahead and some interesting people to hear from in this issue.
We enjoy that day and get involved in all that technology. It'd be lovely to see what's going on there and what they've got.
A good agricultural show.
A good technology agricultural show.
I love it. Yeah, enjoy. Right, how would you like to win £25,025 to help you splash the cash this Christmas? You'd also be in line for some shopping vouchers, which are also quite handy at this time of year, and a GB News goodie bag.
This is a goodie competition, it has to be said, and it is Christmas, so why don't you get in the mood?
You could win Christmas.
I'm Michael Portillo. This is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking, this is the nightmare for the Conservatives again. Down to earth. It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it? And most importantly, honest. Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get the book thrown at them. They catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks, the admission's free.
Patrick Christie's Tonight, weekdays from 9 p.m.
We all know that pensioners will freeze to death this winter because of the cruel cut to the winter fuel payment, rising council tax, the energy price cap going up, all of that. Now, instead of looking after them, we appear to have a government that seems to want to make their lives worse. Now, they might not care, but you do. And thanks to you, I have now raised more than £270,000 for Friends of the Elderly. You have raised more than the entire amount they gave away in grants for the most desperate pensioners last year. So amazing effort. Thank you very much. Now, I said I'd do a freezing cold swim to raise awareness for how cold some pensioners will be in their own homes this winter. And on Saturday, I went to Stickle Tarn in the Lake District. I'd like to give a massive thank you to the people who turned up to meet me along the way. I would also like to give a monumental shout out to the wonderful camera crew. We've got John Clark and Joe Scowen, and our health and safety maestro, known only as the Stag. I come up with these crackpot ideas, but it is down to those wonderful people to make them actually happen. I would also like to give you a little warning. There are aspects of this footage that you will not be able to unsee. I am aware that at times my body resembles a bag of milk. But you know what? If me embarrassing myself helps to raise a bit more money, then so be it. And you can go to justgiving.com/page/Save Our Seniors now to donate.
GB News, the People's Channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here We do things differently. It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it? It's explosive. I mean, this is very good. It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial. And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born. It's everything you need to kickstart your evening. Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it. That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Very interesting and controversial story to talk about now. It's about an incinerator, Runcorn. The Runcorn incinerator, largest of its kind in the country, and it treats almost 1 million tonnes of non-recyclable waste every single year.
But how would you feel if it were the first thing you saw, heard or even smelt every morning?
Well, have a look at this. Our Northwest reporter Sophie Reaper has the story.
High fences and even higher security. The largest incinerator in the UK seems to take no shortcuts when it comes to keeping out the eyes of the public. But residents in the area want people to see the impact it's having on their everyday lives.
It's horrendous. It's like all the steam blowing over into our buildings. The houses are damp. We all wake up with sniffles, coughs every morning. In the summer, the flies are horrendous. Rats have increased, and now we get seagulls as well. As soon as you open curtains, it's just there. I'm reminded of it as soon as I wake up every day.
Last year, following a nuisance claim against plant operator Viridor, local residents were offered a sum of just over £4,500 as compensation. That was in exchange for signing a non-disclosure agreement preventing them from going to the press. Local business owner George Parker was just one of only a handful of people to refuse.
The offer was made 2 weeks before Christmas last year. Of course, most people jumped at the chance. They've never seen £5,000. I refused to take it because I think what they're doing is actually criminal.
When planning permission initially went in, locals were promised the plant would have a low visual impact. But now it's not just the appearance that's become a concern.
I'm worried about the health side of it. You wake up with coughs, colds, everything else. My son's only young. He basically runs a business now, so he's going to be another 30 years, maybe 40 years. What impact is it going to have on him? Because we don't know what's coming out of these chimneys.
GB News asked Viridor for a comment on this, but they refused. However, the Environment Agency had this to say. We have never been able to substantiate any complaints about odour, rats, seagulls or flies from the site, despite frequent visits by our officers. We continue to carry out regular site inspections and audits to ensure the operator is meeting the conditions of its environmental permit. And yet, Mandy owns a dog grooming business. She says she's losing money and is unable to sell her home. Now, she's had enough.
It's just monstrosity. It's ugly. And I bet Mr. Viridor hasn't got one in his front garden. Just because it's a poor area, let's just stick it there, you know. Small people are not going to be able to fight this, so we'll just put them on death row.
Sophie Reaper, GB News.
If what that lady said is true, that is an awful situation. Put it in a poor area. Small people won't be able to object about it. Nobody will listen.
That's awful, isn't it? Yeah, you've got to put it in remote places or out to sea, or even better, just find more stuff that you can recycle.
Your views have your say.
Yes.
Of course, get in touch with us and we'll be happy to reflect those. Or Bev and Andrew will. They're up next from 9:30. Morning, guys.
Morning. Front page of Telegraph, Alison Pearson, of course, she's a friend of this channel, regularly is on Patrick's show, was arrested for a tweet and wasn't even told. This was on, not arrested, she was investigated.
Yeah, 2 police officers turn up at her house, for heaven's sake.
This Sunday on Memorial Remembrance Day when she was getting ready to go to a service. And she isn't even told what it was that she posted, which has been considered a non-crime hate offence.
Yeah, amazing, isn't it? What sort of world are we in? And she thinks it may be something to do with what she may have said about the Hamas attack, the barbaric Hamas attack on Israel on October the 7th. Extraordinary. So that's a big story. And also the fallout from the sacking, the resignation of the Archbishop of Canterbury, an extraordinary moment.
Yeah.
Never happened before.
it seems as though the Church of England are trying to say, look, one scalp is enough. They don't want to see any more bishops losing their posts. Do you think that will lead to...
No, it's not sustainable because other bishops were in the loop, didn't take action. But they were protecting the institution of the Church of England rather than thinking about the victims. And did it allow this monster to carry on rampaging around? It's all right, he's in South Africa.
But we've got a great guest on that. We've got Andrew Grayston, who was one of the victims who wrote the book about the experiences. So he's going to be talking to us this morning. So
so brave of people when they relive it, because as he said, it's been re-traumatising at Archbishop Welby for all of these victims. This report in the last few weeks, it's horrible for them to
But my point about Welby is, you know, you're better safe than sorry. If there was a whiff that this may have happened, surely you go to the extreme to make sure it didn't happen. That is the important thing, not coming to a conclusion.
Yeah, I know. But why did it take the intervention of a woman bishop for him to do the right thing and resign? Because he was going to cling on for dear life.
And is the church ready for a female archbishop? Because this is a divided church. I think that we're going to hear a lot more about this in the coming weeks, months, and also the role of Downing Street in appointing the next archbishop. Loads of complaints about Welby being
The Prime Minister ultimately will have the final say because the names will go to number 10 from this commission, and the Prime Minister will then send a name to the monarch, who nearly always does what the Prime Minister wants. Will the Prime Minister want to be woke and have a woman archbishop?
I would have been good being a bishop. You know, the mitre and staff and all that. So I would have...
The jewellery, the bling...
Eamonn, there's a vacancy.
There's what?
There's a vacancy. There we are.
And there is an element of performance. I was looking at some of the footage of Justin Welby this morning. You've got to like the attention to want to do that.
You've got to, but it's not quite the same as with the Sistine Chapel, is it? Waiting for the whites. It's not quite as dramatic. Anyway, we look forward to your show. As always, thank you, Andrew. Thank you, Bev. Have a good one. That's it from us. We'll be back next week. Bye-bye.
Expect a warm front, moving from the kitchen right through to the rest of the house. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Morning, welcome along to your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. Again, it's a bit chilly out there this morning. Some fog patches around as well. Most of us having a dry day, and for some, there'll be some pleasant autumn sunshine. But first off, we do have to get rid of the fog. And for Western Scotland and Northern Ireland, not a lot of sunshine on offer here. Thicker cloud and at times some drizzly rain. We've lost a shower from the far southeast, still a small chance of one this morning, but generally it's going to be dry across England and Wales. Some patches of cloud and some stubborn fog patches, but much of southern England, eastern England and parts of eastern Scotland seeing some lengthy spells of sunshine, lifting the temperatures to 11, 12 degrees Celsius, so about average for the time of year. Feeling colder, though, where it does stay fairly gloomy. And it's going to be quite a grey day in western Scotland. Rain and drizzle on and off along the coast here. Probably staying dry, though, through the central belt and across the northeast. Decent chance of some sunny spells. Quite a drab day for Northern Ireland. Lots of cloud here. Misty and murky conditions persisting for most of the day. Staying quite grey for northwest England and North Wales. And some stubborn zones of cloud across the Midlands. But elsewhere, I say, many places, South Wales, southern England, eastern England, seeing a fair bit of sunshine. The cloud will continue to drift southwards as we go through the night. That will help to keep the temperatures up, so it won't be as cold tonight as recent nights. Some holds here and there across Scotland could allow those temperatures to dip down close to freezing, but generally speaking, holding up in the mid-single figures for most of us into Thursday. And not as much fog around either first thing on Thursday, but much more in the way of cloud. A duller day, certainly across eastern England and southern England. Again, though, most places dry, but a drizzle here and there over the hills, and we'll see some rain and drizzle at times for northern parts of Northern Ireland, western Scotland, and some showery rain for a time across the Northern Isles. Temperatures, again, mostly getting up to double figures, 10, 11 or 12 Celsius. Signs of things turning colder, though, through this weekend.